Yo, what's going on, y'all?
Happy Thursday.
Welcome to the Thursday edition of Fantasy Face Mask.
Or Face Mask, whatever you prefer, to be honest.
Oh man, sorry, messing that up.
Someone needs some caffeine, apparently.
A little bit, but what's happening, y'all?
Yeah, welcome in. Hopefully, everybody's had a good week so far. Looking forward to the weekend. Maybe a little bit quieter of a weekend after a holiday.
10 I think it's 10 Sundays till the 10? First red zone, right?
I can get on board with a timeline like that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think with today, as always, happy to talk shop about anything and everything. If anybody has anything specific they want to talk about, but we will continue to tackle some 2022 rankings today. We've so far dove in on running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends to some degree. Running backs, I think we made it through the top 24. Wide receivers, we went through the top 36. And tight ends, we've run through the top 12 officially and then an unofficial tight end 2 list that was more along the lines of just guys that we like as far as sleepers. So today we'll do the signal callers. And it was John's idea. You thought it would be a better conversation or a little bit more of an engaging conversation if we expanded this to the top half of the league's quarterbacks and do the top 16, not just the top 12.
Yeah, so, we don't do a third stream where we're talking about people that nobody really care about for fantasy. And if they do, the conversation ends after 8 players if we're really going by 12s. So, yeah, I just figured let's do the first 16. And then if people want to do a second 16, we can do a second 16. Or we could just leave it at the top 16. Depends on what y'all want. And we'll take... we might be able to throw up a poll for that at the closer to the end of the stream.
Sure. Or just like a list of, or it's not like a ranking list, but just like here's some dart throw quarterbacks that were, here's a couple guys that we like for various reasons.
Yeah.
Could do something along those lines. But for now, today will be the top signal callers, the ones that everybody actually wants to draft, especially so in one quarterback leagues. But for those who play Superflex, I'm sure that doing another 8 to 10 quarterbacks would be helpful for them as well.
True.
Because I will say for Superflex, in any Superflex format, of the 16 names that we're going to list today, I want 2 guys from this list, not one guy from this list and one guy who ranks closer to 20 than he does to 10. My general rule of thumb when I play in Superflex formats, and just to take a redraft approach here, I want 2 quarterbacks with my first 4 picks, maybe my first 5 picks, depending on who's available. So that means I'm getting, ideally, a top 6 or 7 option, maybe a top 7 or 8 option, and then another guy who is in the top 12 to 15. And I want to hang my hat on those 2 guys. I'll draft 2 other guys for depth further down the list. I don't need 3 guys in the top 16. That's overkill.
Yeah, I think so too.
you're like, yes, you're well protected from a potential issue or injury, but now you're talking about a potential 5th or 6th round pick riding the bench when all is well for your team. And that's just not the way I want to diversify my assets. So this list absolutely still can be helpful for Superflex leagues, but for those who prefer the strategy of maybe grabbing one guy and loading up on strength at other positions, maybe down the line or maybe next week we can talk about
we've said this about a couple of positions. I mean, this might be the year where you can kind of not punt running back, but you can wait on running back more than you could in other years. You can wait on wide receiver seemingly more than you could in other years, and it kind of seems that way with the top end quarterbacks. You could conceivably wait until the 8th best, 9th best, 10th best quarterback or ranked quarterbacks are going, and still, if you're at the turn, still get 2 good guys there. You've been a huge fan of the Kirk Cousins, the Derek Carrs, those type of guys. So, not to mention a couple of young guys coming in with rushing upside. So it's a more interesting conversation than you would originally think, going over the top quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, we live in an era where there's strong quarterback play throughout the league. We're not limited to just 5 or 6 good players at the position.
Unless you're in Carolina.
Well, that's a different story entirely. And
we haven't talked about that on a public stream yet, but we did address it yesterday for the members. Just a reminder to all y'all, we have members-only live streams for all the members. So if you are interested in another live stream with us a week, you get that on Wednesdays, and it is a little bit more laid back, and a little bit more interactive too. So that's something to throw out there. But let's get right into it, man. Who is, and I think I already know the answer, but who is your QB1?
The QB1 should be everybody's QB1. It's Josh Allen. There's not really much of an argument otherwise. Allen is like, you built a quarterback in a lab, and you took all of the intangibles that you could possibly come up with as far as positive traits for a quarterback, and you applied them to Josh Allen, and he has them all.
Yeah.
High floor, high ceiling, 800 plus yard, 7 to 8 plus touchdown on the ground, rushing upside, on top of a layup for 4,000 plus passing yards in a high octane offense, a pass happy offense that plays to the strengths of Allen. They have the ball in his hands probably on, I would say, 70 to 75% of their plays.
Yeah, sounds about right.
It's a quarterback friendly offense. This is an offense that it's kind of like, the shoot first, ask questions later, as far as we're going to throw the ball. We'll run the ball when we feel like we have to. The running game is, it's what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's a side effect. It's
utilitarian. It's
yeah.
not a main fixture in the offensive game plan.
No, the run game is change of pace.
They do get it done.
Yeah, it's change of pace for the Bills. It's not a staple no matter who they're playing and no matter what the situation is. The situation is the Bills are going to be throwing the ball. Allen is going to be putting up big numbers, and he still remains the best running option in that backfield. Allen is the 101. He should be the 101 in all formats. In one quarterback leagues, he's now regularly going in the 3rd round, and sometimes top of the 3rd round. Admittedly, in one quarterback leagues, that is a little rich for my blood. But if I find myself in a situation where I'm drafting at the end of the 1st round and I get Stephon Diggs, and then at the end of the 3rd round, Allen is there and available to me to complete the stack, I'm not going to do it in the 2nd round. But at the end of the 3rd round, that's an awfully hard thing to pass up.
Yeah.
You're potentially missing out on a good running back or a good wide receiver in favor of a position that is easier to fill. But the upside is exactly what you're getting with Allen, which is a guy who should finish at least top 3 at the position. And in super flex leagues, there's no reason anywhere he should be anything other than the first quarterback taken.
Yeah, I mean he's my no-brainer. He's my no-brainer QB1 here too. 4,407 passing yards, 36 touchdowns. Also had 763 yards on the ground and 6 touchdowns on the ground. He feels like the Travis Kelce of quarterbacks, where he should put together a long string of QB1 performances. It might be 5 years straight before we see him dip down to number 2. He was number 1 last year. He was number 1 the year before. Number 1 in red zone attempts last year. Number 2 in air yards last year. Number 4 in attempts. So that tells the story to me of the offense is good, and he typically is a looking downfield, looking for the big play. If he's number 2 in air yards and number 4 in attempts, you got to make that assumption. Number 7 in dropped passes. That's just going to happen if you're passing as much as Josh Allen is. That isn't to take away from him at all. The one area where I think this offense and Josh Allen can improve at, and he's been vocal about it, is that the receiving yards after the catch per target. Last year he was 78th in receivers yards after the catch per target. So his wide receivers were typically catching the ball and falling down. That seems like the Cole Beasley MO, but it also happened with Stephon Diggs. He has reportedly put an emphasis on changing that. The year before, he was 46th, so that number fell by quite a bit. He was still able to be the QB1. If he gets his the ball to his receivers in the areas of the field, or at least in the area where they have the ability to turn up field more often. I mean, it's hard to say that he has more room to grow, but there's technically more room to grow here. Because he did technically leave some meat on the bone there with respect to receiving yards after the catch per target. The personnel, I think, got better. You're going from a 32-year-old Cole Beasley to a 28, 29-year-old Jamison Crowder. You're going from Emmanuel Sanders, who was 34 years old, to a full-time Gabe Davis. To me, those are improvements. Yep. Gabe Davis might be an in-house promotion receiver, but to me, that's an improvement over Emmanuel Sanders. To me, Jamison Crowder, while he isn't anybody's favorite wide receiver by any standpoint, he should be better at yards after the catch than Cole Beasley was last year. So I think there is room to grow there, and I think he can at least get back to where he was in 2020 in that area with respect to giving his his receivers the ability to make a play with the ball in their hands once they have the ball in their hands. But speaking of his rushing upside, number 3 in carries last year, I don't expect that to change. Number 1 in red zone carries last year. I do expect that.
I don't expect that to change.
I think that drops back a little bit because if you look at we expect Jalen Hurts to be in the red zone a little bit more this year with the addition of AJ Brown. We expect Lamar Jackson to have a full season and not get injured because we don't predict injury.
Yeah,
and he's typically number 1 in rush attempts every single year. So I think the red zone carries could go down in terms of where he's ranked in the league. But he was number 3 in rushing yards last year, number 3 in rushing touchdowns last year. I think that stays. I think that stays static. I don't think that changes. All this to say, Josh Allen is my QB1 too. And what's going on, Alex? It's not a hard decision to make for me.
No. I think the reason we're seeing somebody like Gabe Davis's ADP be where it is, despite not necessarily having actual production to this point warranting the ADP, it's more along the lines of the expectation of the offense. One, you expect Gabe Davis to take that next step as a full-time player. And 2, it's just like the default answer to seeing his ADP in the top 50 is just, well, look at who his quarterback is. Right. That's just it's a testament to Allen. I mean, we believe in a talent like Gabe Davis, but when you're attached to a quarterback of Josh Allen's caliber, it just naturally elevates you.
And when you got a guy on the other side of you playing, whose name is Stephon Diggs, I mean, you're gonna be seeing single coverage a lot. What's going on, CXK?
Yep. What's going on,
Glad
CXK?
to have you in here. What's happening, man? How you been?
Yes, sir.
Alex, in best ball, would you take Pittman, Connor, Marquise, or Sutton?
Connor.
Or Waddle or Deontay? Yeah, I'd have to go Connor too.
Connor.
There's a case to make for Pittman, but I think edge goes to the guy that scored 18 touchdowns last year. Didn't he have 18 or was it 13?
Yeah, he had 18.
18. Yeah.
I would go Connor, and I would hope I'm in a situation, that's like maybe a middle of the third round pick. So I'm hoping in that scenario in the middle of the first round, I got my shot at either Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. So I already have like a stud receiver to hang my hat on. Now give me a guy who's got low end RB1 upside.
Yeah, can't disagree with that.
Now, if you end up with a robust running back strategy, maybe you took Austin Eckler or Derrick Henry. Maybe in the second round, you got Joe Mixon or Aaron Jones or Saquon. Then Pittman's got an argument there because I don't want to I want to keep my flexibility open for the later rounds.
You already got Diggs and Swift. I mean, that's a strong draft if you go either way, but I would still go Connor.
If you got Diggs and Swift, then you can do whatever you want. But then
I would still go Connor.
I would go Connor there because you got your anchor receiver. Any chance Allen is there? It's just something to think about. Something that we were taught. I would still go Connor over Allen, even if I had Diggs. In a one quarterback best ball, even if I have Diggs and I can pick between completing the stack with Josh Allen or adding James Conner, I'm adding Connor.
Yeah, that touchdown upside with him is just astronomical. And
yeah.
He did that last year while playing as the 1B for half of the season. So
yeah. Yep.
All right, so who do you got at QB2? I feel because we went over our rankings a little bit. I already know the answer to what it is. But this is where we diverge for the first time.
Yeah, so my quarterback 2 is a guy who's currently being drafted on Underdog as the quarterback 5, but also is a guy that you have said multiple times on this channel who has been the only one over the past few years to contest Josh Allen's overall QB1 status, and it's Kyler Murray. Little bit of the vibes have been weird with Arizona this year. Kyler started the offseason by not talking to Cardinals brass. He unfollowed them on social media, right? That's the new thing these days, like who's unfollowing who on social media, right? It's like
Ben Simmons is unfollowing his team every other day.
Right, yeah. It's like breaking up with a significant other or whatever. Like, they're not friends on Facebook anymore. Not that anybody uses Facebook, but yeah, you get my point. So it started with that. Obviously, he was looking for a contract extension. The Cardinals were acting like talks are fluid. I imagine Kyler and his camp wanted it to happen, sooner than what the Cardinals' timeline was. Skipping OTAs, which again, these are like little things that the media is going to make a big deal about, but from a fantasy perspective, I don't care about. So the vibes have been weird with Kyler. Then the DeAndre Hopkins suspension happened. So, it was like, okay, what are the fallouts from this? One of them is Kyler doesn't have his wide receiver 1 for the first third of the season. They do kind of try to buoy that situation, I guess, by trading for Marquise Brown, who will hold down the fort until DeAndre Hopkins comes back. But then when Hopkins comes back, all of a sudden they've got a pretty deep and strong wide receiver core in Arizona there.
Ready for the playoffs, or for the fantasy playoffs. Yeah.
Right, which is big time. So Kyler gets, has to weather that storm a little bit, but is the only dual threat quarterback that has so far been able to challenge Josh Allen over the past couple of seasons. He's the, The threats for 6, 7, 800 yards rushing on the ground are Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and maybe Jalen Hurts and Trey Lance, but they're a tier below.
I'm not maybe. It is Jalen Hurts, not maybe Jalen Hurts.
Well, okay, then maybe Trey Lance.
Yeah.
But they're the ones who are a little bit more volatile, I guess. We're not as comfortable as far as the overall ranking.
Kyler is Nick's QB2, and just full disclosure, he is my QB3, Hunter. But good to see you. What's happening?
Yeah, Hunter. Kyler is my QB2 for the 2022 season. Just to go over a couple of numbers here, he hasn't topped 4,000 yards in a season yet, but he's come pretty close. 3,700 passing yards his rookie season, but he chipped in over 500 yards on the ground and 20 passing scores. His sophomore campaign, he almost eclipsed 4,000 passing yards. Actually played in 16 games that year. So he was close, but still a year 2 player. But where he really shined was 819 rushing yards, 26 passing scores. I think on a points per game basis, he was like the QB2 or QB3 that year. The only other one who was ahead of him was Josh Allen. And then last year, he missed 3 games, almost 3,800 passing yards, down to 400 some odd rushing yards, 423 to be specific. He dealt with, I think it was an ankle issue. So he was limited in he missed 3 games due to injury, but then he returned, but it was limiting him as far as his effectiveness on the ground. So he wasn't running as much as he usually does. And then still finished with 24 passing touchdowns. So, it's been, I guess, a combination of just, inexperience. He's still a young quarterback, only going into his 4th season, and he has dealt with injuries. Shoulder issue, I think, shoulder issue in 2020 that limited him from through the air, and then the lower body, lower leg issues in 2021 that limited him on the ground. So that's what has held him back thus far. But on a points per game basis, he has been in the QB1 discussion. So all he needs to do is stay healthy, which is easier said than done for a rushing quarterback. But Kyler has also shown to be pretty heads up as far as trying to avoid hits and avoid contact, sliding when necessary, getting out of bounds when necessary, because he's not some 6'5" body who can take on would-be tacklers and gain those extra yards. Kyler is 5'10". It's not his MO to engage contact. So if he's able to, again, easier said than done, if he can get through a season mostly unscathed, you're talking about the only other quarterback to challenge for the overall QB1 finish other than Josh Allen since Lamar Jackson like 3 years ago.
And just to put that into perspective with the actual the numbers here, from weeks 1 to week 16 in 2021, Kyler Murray was the QB1. And then in week 17, Allen had a monster game. Kyler didn't. And Allen overtook Kyler in the most meaningless game of the season. So when it mattered, if for your fantasy team, Kyler Murray was the QB1 in 2021 or in 2020, and people forget that. Yeah. QB10 last year, behind 3,787 yards in only 14 games, 423 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. He was the QB4 by points per game last year, QB3 by points per game the year, or QB2 by points per game the year before that. Number 1 in money throws last year on Player Profiler. That's what they dub money throws. It's just throws that are
accurate.
Throws that are on the right on the money. Yeah.
Right on the numbers.
Number 4 in yards per attempt. Number 3 in fantasy points per dropback. Number 1 in deep ball completion percentage, which bodes well for Marquise Brown. They just drafted one of the best deep threats in the league, conceivably, with the speed that he has. So number 1 in deep ball completion percentage, Marquise Brown should help that even more, should help him hold that spot. Number 1 in true completion percentage anywhere on the field. So he was really accurate last year, and that's kind of lost in the numbers with Lamar or with Kyler. Number 4 in carries, number 4 in red zone carries, number 4 in rush yards, number 4 in touchdowns, in rush touchdowns, and that's with missing, again, 4 games last year. So on a points per game basis, he did even better than that. And in the 5 to 6 games that he played without Deshaun Watson, he was QB6 by fantasy points per game. So, I mean, even without his number one target and with Christian Kirk as his number one target going out there with A.J. Green and Zach Ertz, he was still able to put up a QB6 line while everybody was kind of shitting on him. I mean, people weren't thinking very highly of Kyler towards the end of the season. He was still able to be the QB6. So right now, he is my QB3 because I do believe the Hopkins suspension will hurt to a certain extent. Yes, they bring in Marquise Brown, but Christian Kirk is out of that offense too. So there is a give and take situation there. Zach Ertz, a year older. AJ Green, a year older. So no Chase Edmonds. So for that first 6 games, I don't think he is going to be a top 4, top 3 fantasy quarterback. But as soon as he gets DeAndre Hopkins back, and as soon as it's DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown, the sky's the limit for Kyler, and he could finish the year as the fantasy QB1. So that first 8, is it 6 games or 8 games? I think it's 6 games.
6 games.
So that first 6 games, I am discounting Kyler Murray to a certain extent. He is my QB3. I do have Justin Herbert ahead of him, but I do think, just like you think, that QB1 overall ceiling for him is definitely still there, and he has a very good chance to achieve that as soon as week 7 this year on a week per week basis. So I'm really high on Kyler too.
Yeah, I obviously you have to factor in the Hopkins suspension here, but yeah, I guess I'm just more along the lines of thinking, just do what you can. If you have Kyler, do what you can, who is a round or so cheaper than Herbert, who is my QB3, is just tread water. Do what you can, even if you're 500, or even if you have a losing record through the first half of the season. If you're 2-4, 3-3, like, you're not done. You're not dead, right? It's not the start that you want, but in a situation where you're just able to tread water and then Kyler gets that boost mid-season, like, that's something that I'm willing to wait on based on his upside, based on Kyler's upside.
And I mentioned it. I have Justin Herbert at 2. So
Herbert's my quarterback 3.
To speak a little bit on him, he was QB2 in fantasy points, total fantasy points, to Josh Allen's number 1 last year. 5,014 yards and 38 touchdowns.
672 pass attempts.
That's crazy. Number 2 in pass attempts last year to only the guy that was finished second in all time in pass attempts in a single season in Tom Brady last year. But the pace of play there is real strong. 3rd in pace of play, number 1 in plays per game, number 4 in dropped passes. That is by nature because he throws so many pass attempts, so that's not something that I'm really worried about. Number 9 in carries and rush TDs. And so that is an underrated thing when you're looking at Justin Herbert, which is why I did still edge him over Kyler Murray, even considering the fact that Kyler Murray has that rush upside. Because Justin Herbert technically has that rush upside too, just not to the same extent. 302 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns on the ground. And if you've seen the pictures of Justin Herbert coming into the season this year, he bulked up.
He's looking swole.
He's looking pretty swole. So yeah, he should probably get not a ton more carries, because his game is predicated on passing the ball, but I could see them rushing with him a little bit more. I could see him having the confidence in his body to hold up to that punishment a little bit more and be able to, instead of rushing for 302 yards, maybe it's 402 yards. And maybe he gets 100 more rushing yards on the ground in a full season, and maybe he gets 2 more looks in the red zone at running the ball in, and then all of a sudden he's at 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, and that's kind of what Russell Wilson was giving you in Russell Wilson's prime, on top of being a threat to pass for 5,000 passing yards and close to 40 touchdowns. So I love Kyler Murray, but I do like Justin Herbert just a little bit more, considering he has his full squad of weapons for the entire season. If Kyler
fair.
Murray was to have his DeAndre Hopkins, his number one wide receiver for the entire season, it'd be a no-brainer for me. But with the strengths that Justin Herbert brings to the table, he does get the edge there.
That's fair. What's going on, Slim?
What's happening, Slim?
Thanks for stopping in. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point about Herbert's potential for more rushing work. The talk of this offseason has been, as it pertains to Austin Eckler, that he has gone out of his way to ask the coaching staff for ways to scale back his workload, to keep him fresh while also still, maximizing his abilities. I mean, they've kind of piecemealed it together with the likes of, drafting Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree. Now they add Isaiah Spiller in the 4th round. I mean, we talk about how Josh Allen is, 6'5", almost 240. Justin Herbert is the same thing. Justin Herbert is 6'6", probably close to 240 pounds. And for whatever it's worth, Justin Herbert's 40 time is a tick faster than Josh Allen's. So it's not like he's not a statue. He can do it. It's just he's just such a proficient passer. He's such a strong passer. You want him throwing the ball. I mean, he's completing his passes at a 65, 66, 67% clip, throwing for 5,000 yards. Yeah, that's what you want your quarterback doing. But the way to spell Austin Eckler as far as running the ball could come from just more designed runs from Herbert. So I'm with you. Not to the I do have Kyler as my QB2. Obviously, the stipulation is Kyler won't have Hopkins to start the season. But Herbert is right there. Phenomenal talent, fantastic player at the position. Has the size, has the speed, has the arm strength. He's like Josh Allen, a total package. Exactly what you're looking for from again, I used the term like built in a lab. Josh Allen was built in a lab. Justin Herbert was also built in a lab.
Yeah.
And with great weapons to boot, probably a deeper collection of weapons.
Absolutely.
Than Josh Allen has.
More pass focused when you look at the number one running back being a pass catching first running back.
Eckler clears anything in the Bills' backfield.
Yeah.
And
they're hoping that James Cook becomes an Austin Eckler light.
Yeah, like 50% as good.
Right.
They would take that. So, yeah, I mean, the blueprint, the pieces are all in place for Herbert to have sustained success, putting up big numbers this year and every year of his career. He's fantastic. I have him as my QB3 because Kyler, when healthy, is the larger rushing threat, is what gave the edge to Kyler. But I mean, the top 3 are pretty solidified for me, and Herbert is firmly in there.
Yeah, nobody's coming. I don't think by next season I'm gonna be switching up my top 3 all that much. I think my top 3, even by 2023, will be pretty much the same.
I don't have a reason to change that now. No. So those are the top 3. Josh Allen, I have Kyler at 2. John has Herbert at 2, and then flip-flop at 3. So pretty easy discussion to be had there, all things considered. Just checking out the chat really quick before we continue.
Hey, man, I don't think your Campus to Canton startup is all gone, or is all for naught here. I mean, picking up Mahomes and Lamar ahead of Kyler, that's a preferential thing. It could be more of a seeking longevity and going off of past production thing too, because I mean Lamar has led the league in passing, and we'll get to Lamar real quick. You have Lamar at number 4, right?
Yeah, well, I mean we're going to talk about Lamar next. Yeah, I have him at 4.
Yeah, so I don't think you have much to worry about there, man.
No. So
and I have Mahomes at 5, so you're getting, and I think Nick does too. So you got the QB4 and QB5 for this season. This is not a dynasty discussion. This is for this season. So how it factors into your Campus to Canton leagues is a little bit different than the rankings that we have right now.
With Lamar, yes, he might be a little bit more balanced this year, but they essentially promoted Rashad Bateman, and that was their way of replacing Marquise Brown. So I guess in that sense, they didn't replace Bateman's rookie role, but they still have him. They still have Mark Andrews. We saw Lamar Jackson, you kind of already alluded to this, lead the league in touchdowns with Willie Snead being like the most veteran receiver of that pass catching.
I forget
group.
That he was the only guy there. I mean,
well,
Marquise Brown was there too, but
he was a rookie, and he was he popped his first game, but he was wildly inconsistent, as lots of rookies are. Mark Andrews, I feel like, has come into his own since then. He was an interesting, promising young player that season. Now he's widely considered a top 2 tight end. So you're still talking about an elite threat in the passing game for Baltimore, and an ascending talent in Bateman. No, they don't throw the ball to the running backs, but to your point about Lamar maybe being more balanced this year, they did what they did do with the pick that they acquired in the Marquise Brown trade was bolster the offensive line, which was something they sorely needed to do. Mm-hmm. Lamar is going to continue to run. And if the offensive line is performing better, and remember, they should be getting Ronnie Stanley back this year, who is when healthy, one of the best left tackles in the game.
Yep.
Plus they add the highest touted center of the draft in the first round. His offensive line is better now. So I'm not too worried about Lamar from a fantasy perspective. He's not in our top 3, but it's not like there's a tier break here. He's a unanimous MVP just a couple of years ago, and one of the greatest rushing threats at the quarterback position we have ever seen in a very short amount of time. You'll be fine with Lamar. And as it pertains to Mahomes, like you said, this is just our rankings for this year. Mahomes long-term is still fine. He might miss Tyreek this year, but it was a strategic move by the Chiefs to keep flexibility for them down the road as they navigate building a contending team around Mahomes' contract. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity to add more receiving threats is still there down the line.
Yeah, and the threats that he has on his team, the young threats, will mature. We will see Sky Moore mature as the year goes on. We will see maybe they stick with Juju in the long term. He is signed to a 1-year deal. Maybe they stick with Juju in the long term. But I want to touch on Lamar Jackson first. QB 15 last year, despite missing 6 games, which is quite a feat in itself. QB 7 in fantasy points per game last year, 29th in pass attempts, and that's not factoring in the fact that he did miss those 6 games. Number 4 in fantasy points per dropback. I think that's a big stat for him. Number 4 in fantasy points per dropback. Number 2 in carries, total carries. Again, in only 12 games, he finished number 2 in carries. Number 1 in carries per game, so he was still rushing the ball at an elite rate. Number 2 in rush yards, again, while missing 6 games. Did it with no running backs and a depleted defense and a depleted O-line. To Nick's points, fix the O-line. The defense should return healthier, and we like and look, he's 2 years removed from, again, leading the league in touchdowns, but he also led the league in game script, which is a stat again on playerprofiler.com in 2019 and 2020. So when he has healthy running backs and a healthy defense, game script is in his favor. Mm-hmm. He didn't have that this year. He was pressed a little bit this year. But as soon as he gets put back into the role where they want him to be, I think he, instead of being, QB 8, QB 7, he's more QB 4, QB 5 if that, maybe with the ceiling for more. With what he brings to the table, there's even a ceiling for more. And I know people are going to talk about his weapons in Marquise Brown leaving and stuff, but they really are going to be treating Mark Andrews like a wide receiver. They drafted or accumulated 2 tight ends in this year's draft, and they get Nick Boyle back healthy, who's one of the better blocking touchdown or tight ends in the league. So they're going to have the tight end room to block the hell out of the ball for the offense and let Mark Andrews just be basically a wide receiver from the slot. And maybe Rashad Bateman is more efficient on a per play basis than Marquise Brown was even last season, and it's technically not hard to replace what Rashad Bateman was doing last season with another wide receiver. I know they don't have highly touted wide receivers on the team, and they saw enough out of him to promote him to wide receiver 1, but he wasn't blowing the doors off of fantasy gamers last year with his fantasy totals. So I really think Lamar Jackson's going to be fine. I really think Lamar Jackson's going to be fine. If you're worried about him, I think you're overthinking it. He's QB4 only because there are such strong quarterbacks in the league now.
Yep.
But putting him at QB4 is not indictment on him.
No.
It's just by nature of the fact that there are just a ton of really good young quarterbacks right now. But he has QB1 upside just like any of the guys in the top 3. He does, and he's shown it already.
Oh yeah, he's already done it.
Right.
We're a couple of years removed from it, but he
hasn't lost a step. That's not the reason why. That's not the reason why he's a few years removed from that finish. I think a lot of that has to do with the team around him.
So what has transpired since Lamar's QB1 finish is he started off the following year slow, right? But in the second half of the season, from I think it was like week 8 or week 9 on, he was the overall QB1 for the rest of the season. And then last year, the backfield was decimated by injury. The team in general was decimated by injury. And then Lamar himself eventually got hurt and had to missed the rest of the season. By like week 12, 13, somewhere around there, week 14.
2 years ago, they were trying to figure out what J.K. Dobbins was bringing to the table. They were they had finally figured out that Mark Ingram had lost a step and couldn't perform as their RB1, because in the season where Lamar Jackson was the QB1, it was Mark Ingram as the RB1 for that year, and he caught 13 touchdowns because he was a dual threat in the red zone, and they didn't have that the year after that. So I just think there's a really good chance that he gets back to top 3 quarterback.
It's just ranking. It's just a numbers crunch, because literally somebody has to be 4th.
Right. But don't feel bad. All this to say, don't feel bad about Lamar Jackson.
No, don't feel bad about having Lamar,
especially in a Campus to Canton league.
No,
and don't feel bad about Mahomes either.
Yeah, so I feel like we just
redraft. It's this year. Then you might be thinking, maybe, "Oh man, I might have made a mistake." But
maybe, and it's like maybe Mahomes is still good enough to deliver the goods.
I think he has to take a little bit of a step back with all new weapons, playing in a completely what should be a completely different offense without Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, and this is why we have. So I feel like we covered Lamar's and kind of. Alex's comment was kind of a segue into our discussion about Lamar as our QB4. Mm-hmm. So we kind of covered that. But as far as Mahomes at 5, this is it's twofold, right? There's the primary reason Mahomes is for both of us down at 5 is because he no longer has one of the most elite playmakers in the NFL at his disposal in Tyreek Hill. That's not a thing anymore. But the Chiefs didn't do nothing, right? They signed Juju Smith-Schuster. They signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They drafted Sky Moore. They kept the position that, they retained talent at the position. But yes, none of those guys are Tyreek Hill. None of those guys are anywhere close to Tyreek Hill. So it is a downgrade. They also lose Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle for what it's worth, too. So there's additional continuity that Mahomes needs to work on with multiple new guys. But Juju should be a reliable slot receiver for him. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is inconsistent, but offers deep threat upside for this team. Not to the same level as Tyreek Hill, not even close, but offers deep threat upside. He still has the tight end one in Travis Kelce. And he's got some intriguing rookies to throw the ball to in Sky Moore, and we'll see about the development of Justin Ross. But
yeah, I'm not holding my breath there.
But the options, but there are enough options in this passing game, and we know that Mahomes is a great quarterback and good enough to make it work, most likely with the weapons that he has. His numbers with and without Tyreek are something that have to be noted. But Mahomes himself is a nowhere close to the rushing threat that the other guys ahead of him are, but he can do it on the ground. He can chip, and maybe he chips in a little bit more there this year as kind of a fallback while he's building continuity with new teammates. That can't be ruled out. Maybe on any given play, he decides to scramble because something happened where this wouldn't have happened with Tyreek, but something happened downfield where, an assignment was missed or whatever. Now Mahomes
or he
takes
can't
off.
just dump it off to Darrell Williams because Darrell Williams isn't there anymore and they don't have a running back that can catch passes.
Well, we think they might, but they don't use Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
You know what I mean.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
here's
the potential, I guess, is there.
The stats on Pat Mahomes here: number 3 in pass attempts last year, number 4 in deep ball attempts. That's going down. I know the report from today said that Marquez Valdez-Scantling was the standout in camp and all that stuff. You lost Tyreek Hill. So the number 4 in deep ball attempts is coming down. Number 4 in passing yards, I believe that does come down a little bit with this new squad of pass catchers that he's going to be working with. Number 5 in danger plays, I think he has felt willing to just kind of sling it out downfield because he had Tyreek Hill. That comes down a little bit. I do think Pat Mahomes is going to have to be a little bit more conservative in his passing game. Now, he was still number 1 in accuracy rating. So he's still the most accurate quarterback in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think he is going to have to play a little bit more conservative with not having Tyreek Hill. And last year was a step back from him in production in terms of what he had done for the past, basically since he's been a starter. The QB5 finish for him in fantasy points per game was his lowest finish in the last few years. Now, that is a crazy floor to have. QB5 in fantasy points per game as a floor. Crazy floor to have, but he might be closer to his floor than his ceiling. So I have him ranked right at where he finished last season. And I think that's fair because the talent, we know the talent we're dealing with here is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. There just might be, growing pains is the wrong word because he's a fully fleshed out quarterback. But there are going to be some growing pains with this offense, with the new pieces in this offense. I do believe that. But number 4 in passing touchdowns, that might come down a little bit too. Because again, he doesn't have one of the best deep threat wide receivers, if not the best deep threat wide receiver in the league anymore. But to your point, could rush a little bit more. He had 381 rushing yards last year, which is 80 more than Herbert had last year. Only had 2 rushing touchdowns, but that could come up to 4.
Yeah, maybe that goes up a little bit.
Right. So I do think there are routes to seeing Pat Mahomes buoy his overall production despite the steps back that we expect him to just have to be
to naturally deal with.
Right. Thank you. But I think you can't put him lower than QB5. He's Pat Mahomes.
Right. Yeah, in a non-fantasy conversation, he's a top 2 player that you take at the position.
Yo, Juju and Jackson Mahomes will do some TikTok. Yo, I want to say I can't wait for that, but I'm also dreading it at the same time.
I can totally wait for that. I have no need for that, but you're right, Iron. That's absolutely something that is in play this year. Rojo, Jameis is not on my top 16 list, to be completely honest, but he is one of my favorite late round quarterback targets. I don't even know what my exposure for him is on Underdog Fantasy, but it's I would say it's probably significant. He might be my most.
Check it now.
I am checking it right now. I have in the post NFL. Okay, I have fewer shares than I thought. I have some entry fees of Jameis Winston, but he's on almost 20% of my teams. So he is I definitely like targeting Jameis late. As a former 5,000-yard passer with significantly better weapons this year, even if Michael Thomas, for whatever reason, has another setback and can't play. Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry present huge upgrades over what he had last year. And it sounds like Alvin Kamara might duck suspension at least to start the season. So, yeah, wheels up on Jameis, but he didn't quite make the top. He didn't make this conversation for me. He's getting there. He's close though. The numbers are there, but he's not in the top 16.
No, not for me either. But he might be 17, 18. He might be just on the cusp there for me.
He might be right around there, and especially for the cost, his cost.
The weapons are scary for me for him.
Yeah,
that like if we knew Michael Thomas was going to be completely healthy coming back, it might be a different story.
Yeah, maybe he sneaks in.
My QB7, I know for a fact, is different than your QB7. My QB7 or QB6 rather is Joe Burrow.
Joey backdoor at QB6.
Yep.
Okay. I do not have the same QB6 either, but let's hear it on Joe.
4,611 passing yards, 34 touchdowns.
Yep.
Didn't run a lot last year because, as we know, their O-line was pretty bad. And he was coming off leg injury.
He was coming off the injury, so there could have been some reservations there, yeah.
Right, so he only had 118 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, but he didn't need it. Still got to the Super Bowl. Number 6 in money throws, number 8 in passing touchdowns, number 1 in yards per attempt. Number 1 in clean pocket completion percentage. He didn't have a clean pocket much last season, but number 1 in clean pocket completion percentage. They did upgrade their O-line this past offseason.
Yeah, they did.
Brought over Alex Kappa from the Bucs, who was on one of the best rated O-lines last season. I think they also drafted some O-linemen, didn't they?
They signed Kappa. They signed Lyle Collins.
Lyle Collins, there you go. That was the other one.
And I can't remember if they had another transaction with the offensive line, but they brought in those 2 guys for sure.
All this to say, he should be operating from a clean pocket more often than he was last season for sure. And he should rush more considering his leg's completely healthy, or should be completely healthy by now, 1 year removed from the surgery itself. Number 3 in receiving yards after the catch per attempt, which, again, is a credit to his wide receivers. He has 2 of the best young wide receivers in the game.
Yeah, he does.
And there's room to grow there. It was Jamar Chase's first season last year. There's room to grow for Jamar Chase. There's room to grow for T. Higgins. He's only 23, 24 years old himself.
Yep.
He was number 1 in pressured catchable pass rate last year as well. So number 1 in clean pocket completion percentage and number 1 in pressured catchable pass rate last season.
Mm-hmm.
Put those 2 things together, he had the best catchable pass rate last season, despite the fact that by the numbers technically Pat Mahomes had that. But if he's operating from a cleaner pocket the majority of the time this year, and those wide receivers see a bump in production, and Tyler Boyd is still there, and they might use Joe Mixon as a more of a pass catcher this season. That's been alluded to. Yeah, and Joe Burrow should rush a little bit more.
Yeah.
I got him at QB6. I know there are some rushing quarterbacks that you like ahead of him. But I think like Burrow technically has last year Justin Herbert upside, who finished as the QB2.
Oh, yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. 6'4", 221. He's very much a prototypical quarterback that you want. I have one reservation about Burrow, and it kind of really doesn't have anything to do with him or any one player on the Bengals in particular.
What's that?
It's more of a trend that I can't help but worry about.
The Super Bowl hangover BS?
It's the Super Bowl hangover that often comes with teams that lose the Super Bowl. In that there is an incredible weight, or there's an incredible expectation that comes with for these players. And when you make it that far and you don't win, it's mentally taxing. It's exhausting to make it as far as the Super Bowl and not win it. I am speaking based purely off of just having been a fan of the NFL and just absorbing information and things from other people and other players and all that. I can't speak to this personally, but it's not hard to believe when you come so close to achieving the ultimate goal and just falling short. It's difficult to come back from that. Now, the Bengals are young, right? The Bengals are young. It's not like they were this ragtag crew of players who had the most magical season possible, and they put it all together, and this was their one shot and they failed, right? This is the opposite.
That might be true for the defense. The defense will probably be worse this season.
The defense is going to be worse.
It'll push Burrow to pass more and do more on offense, which speaks to his fantasy, the boost I expect from him in fantasy this season. But go on.
Yeah. So with that, just last year in 2021, the Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and Andy Reid calling the shots on the sidelines, had a spell last year. I think there was like a 6 or 7 game stretch where Mahomes threw 1 touchdown or fewer. And it was just this weird middle of the season lull, and every sports show, podcast, you name it, the headline to kick off every show was, what's going on with the Chiefs? What's wrong with Kansas City? And for me, the short answer is nothing. The short answer is nothing was wrong with the team. It's just that it is hard to mentally bounce back from a season like the one the Bengals just had. So that's my one concern. So do the Bengals go through a bit of a lull period next year as they bounce back from, yes, this proverbial quote unquote Super Bowl hangover? Burrow is still excellent. There's no question there. The offensive line improved, to your point. The wide receivers is the probably deepest collection of talent and best collection of high-end talent. If I'm not remembering another team, please let me know. But Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, that's 2 top 10 players at the position right there. 2 top 12 players.
Yeah.
Right, and they're not even 25 years old yet. Jamar Chase, I think, maybe just became, it's legal for him to drink now, I guess. Like, it's these are kids. These are kids who are at the top of their game, at the top of their profession. They're only going to continue to get better. I just have a slight reservation about what the intangibles around this season for the Bengals might lead to. And for that reason, I have Burrow as my QB8. I have some rushing quarterbacks who a couple of spots ahead of him. Still
And
a top 10 quarterback.
I'm not as superstitious as you. I know the Madden cover thing is a thing, and I guess you could point to losing the Super Bowl being a thing. But not every team is a dynasty like the Patriots and Tom Brady. And I feel like we have short memories sometimes, and the expectations put on the Chiefs weren't just they lost one Super Bowl. They had been to 2 Super Bowls consecutively. They had won one of them. They were thought of as, no question, everybody's favorite to win again. Yeah. Nobody's thinking the Bengals are a favorite to even get. They have a hard road to get back into the Super Bowl. Nobody's thinking of that team like we were thinking of the Chiefs. Nobody, yeah. And this isn't a team to me that's comparable to like the Falcons when they lost and then went on a slump. Or I think it's situational, and I'm not really superstitious with regards to Super Bowl hangovers. I think that's a cute narrative that people like to play on, and then point to it.
Cute.
Cute. Yeah, I'm not.
You get out of here.
I'm not superstitious like that. I'm not gonna hold that against Joe Burrow's fantasy value this season, because that might be a win-loss total type situation if it does play into anything in reality. If it is something that is really, if it's real, the Super Bowl hangover. But with respect to fantasy quarterback play, I think there's room to grow for Burrow. I don't think there's room there. I'm expecting a step back for him. With everything that we've already mentioned and gone over, I think there's room to grow there. So that's why I have him at QB6.
There's room to
grow.
And
this is not an indictment on the quarterback that you have at 6 and I have at 7. So take it away.
Yeah. So my quarterback 6 is the guy who I pegged as the quarterback 6 last year, and then he finished as the quarterback 6. It's Jalen Hurts, who I still think honestly is getting underdrafted a little bit on Underdog Fantasy. I think his ADP is around the 60s right now.
Yeah.
I need to pull up his rushing numbers. I know he scored 10 touchdowns on the ground.
782 yards and 10 touchdowns.
Yeah, so that's going to be admittedly hard to replicate. However,
the yardage, no. The touchdowns, absolutely.
The touchdowns will be difficult to replicate. But we also expect the Eagles to, and you already kind of alluded to, I don't know if you said this off screen or on camera or off camera or recently or yesterday or today or what, I don't remember. But the Eagles, we think the Eagles are going to have more scoring opportunities this year.
Yes. Agreed.
With the acquisition of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts, both another year of seasoning and development. Dallas Goedert has top 5 tight end upside. We're not ranking him as a top 5 tight end, but he's got that upside. As from a numbers perspective, all of the advanced metrics as far as yards per route run and all of that, Goddard's in that conversation. So the weapons are there, and the offensive line is excellent. The Eagles' offensive line is fantastic. They're not good. They're really good. They're great. They're older. Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson. They're older, but you're talking about 2 of the most established players at their position in the league. Jason Kelce is maybe a Hall of Famer. So this offensive line is seasoned, experienced, and really strong, which plays to the strengths of the Eagles' offense, which, yeah, they might want to throw the ball a little bit more, and they're going to have to if they actually want to have legitimate success. You have to throw the ball in today's NFL. Yeah. But we've seen what the Eagles can do on the ground last year, which is literally be the best rushing attack in the NFL. And Jalen Hurts is leading the charge on that. Miles Sanders himself, on a podcast with a beat reporter from Philly, said, "Don't draft me in fantasy." Miles Sanders said that. Now, there's only so much weight you can put into like a tongue-in-cheek comment like that. But the point is, the Eagles utilize multiple players in the offense to the detriment of fantasy production, but not Hurts. If Hurts is going to continue to operate as like this, sort of a red zone threat on the ground for them, then a 5 touchdown floor is still very much there for him.
Yeah.
Plus, we expect more work in the passing game, again, with the acquisition of A.J. Brown. The question will be, is Hurts' accuracy, maybe more specifically the deep ball accuracy, and seeing and reading the entire field. That was an issue for him last year and remains an outstanding question that he needs to answer. Going through seeing the field, finding open guys, going through your second and third reads, and then actually throwing an accurate ball. This is where Jalen Hurts struggled last year and needs to improve. So 6 might be lofty, but I had him here last year, and now he's got a year of seasoning under his belt and got better weapons in the passing game. Jalen Hurts doesn't have the passing upside that any of the other guys in this conversation have. None of the guys that we just mentioned. Not even close. But he's got tier 1 rushing upside with the likes of Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. And that's enough for me to put him closer to 5 than 10 for my quarterback rankings.
I have Jalen Hurts at 7.
Okay, not too far off.
He was 21 in pass attempts last year. That should go up with A.J. Brown. He was number 3 in air yards per attempt, which is a stat that surprised me a little bit because the narrative on him coming off of last season was that he didn't have the arm strength to drive the ball down the field, but he was number 3 in air yards per attempt. So he was passing it deep a lot. Number 1 in fantasy points per dropback, which is kind of wild. I don't know if that is a sustainable ranking for him in that metric. But he was number 1 in carries last year, would have been number 2 had Lamar Jackson finished the season. He was number 1 in red zone carries per game last year, number 1 in rushing yards, number 1 in rush TDs. They did not re-sign Jordan Howard, and he now has A.J. Brown. So their goal line back from last season is gone, and they traded for A.J. Brown. So that points to hopefully Jalen Hurts taking a step forward. He was QB9 last season. Mm-hmm. On the back of basically that 782 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns rushing. Number 6 in fantasy points per game. But I do think that rushing touchdown total comes down a little bit. Josh Allen only had 6.
Yeah, Lamar 10 Jackson is hard to replicate.
Lamar Jackson had 2. And he had the second most carries in the league, even in that short sample size. Yeah. I know, but those weird outlier things happen, and that's my point. They happen. So we're hoping he gets to 5-6. But that's not even a guarantee for him. Kyler Murray got to 5 in 14 games. Lamar Jackson got to 2 in 12 games. You would expect him with 6 more games under his belt to double up on that number. But so, 4 to 5 touchdowns seems within the realm of reality when we're talking about Jalen Hurts. I don't know if it's fair to expect much more than that. Anything more than that is a gift, also considering there's going to be more emphasis put on passing the ball this year than rushing the ball.
Right, yeah. The Eagles are going to want to take an extended look at what they actually have from the quarterback position. Yeah.
Right. So, and again, I have him at 7. You have him at 6. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to fight you on the 6. But I do think there are reasons to temper your expectations to a certain amount on putting him, it's... I think he's being underdrafted right now.
Okay.
So I agree with you there. I don't know how high of a ceiling he has.
Sure.
Considering he had such an efficient year last year. And he's not thought of as one of those top QBs, rushing dual threat quarterbacks like the Lamars, the Kylers, and the Josh Allens. But in that second tier of rushing quarterbacks, he is the best of them. And he does and has already shown that 10 touchdown season, 10 touchdown ceiling. So it's a reality that, that he has that ceiling. I just don't know if I'm betting on him having that ceiling this year. I don't think he takes a step back. I think he stays kind of where he's at, because I do think the passing numbers will be boosted a little bit this year, but I do expect some of those rushing totals with respect to the touchdowns do come down a little bit. So I think he kind of evens out and kind of stays where he was at. But that's not a bad thing. You're still getting a mid-tier.
He didn't climb that much,
right,
from last year.
Right. So yeah, I have Jalen Hurts 7. You have him 6. Who do you have at 7?
So 7 is where I am kind of taking my moonshot.
Hey, it worked for you last year with Jalen Hurts.
It did work with Jalen Hurts. I'm kind of planting my flag on this one, but I'm going back. So just looking at the chat here, I know you mentioned getting caught up on the rushing upside. Guilty. I am a sucker for rushing upside, and that's what I go for. Now, I had Tom Brady everywhere last year, but different scenarios present themselves where it's like, this is what I like relative to the circumstances. Like last year, I had Tom Brady everywhere because I liked it. I liked his chances to put up big passing numbers, and at his cost, it was an easy call. So there are scenarios where it's like, yeah, give me the pocket passer, but in a vacuum, guilty on the rushing upside. And that's gonna manifest itself with this number 7 ranking that I have. My number 7 quarterback for the 2022 season is Trey Lance.
That is that's a shocker. But
give me the Konami code at quarterback. But you just met, yeah. I mean, you were lots of people were not on the Jalen Hurts train with me last year, and he delivered the goods. I think Trey Lance can be this year's Jalen Hurts, the 2022 version of 2021 Jalen Hurts, where he is being drafted in the 10th round or so, but he offers that tier 1 rushing upside. Trey Lance is with great weapons, by the way. Give me much better weapons than Jalen Hurts had in 2021. That's the guy that I'm willing to take the moonshot on this year. Trey Lance is, I think, being drafted after Dak Prescott, after Tom Brady, after Matthew Stafford. I want him over all of them. There's not too much to go off in the numbers department as far as being able to back up this claim, right?
I got some for you if you want them.
Well, there's one. I have one. And again, this is on Player Profiler. It's receiver yards after the catch per target.
Yeah, I've mentioned that a few times on this stream already, but go for it. I know what you're going to say.
Trey Lance doesn't qualify. Let me caveat this. Lance just didn't play enough last year to qualify for any official rankings from an efficiency perspective, true passer rating, QBR, accuracy, all of the advanced statistics that we try to take a look at to kind of dissect these rankings and make a final call. But he was number 1 on, as far as receiver yards after the catch per target. From a passing perspective, I just don't think Trey Lance doesn't need to do that much, because what the 49ers offense is predicated on is getting the ball out really fast to their playmakers and letting them do things in space after the catch. Debo is we talk about yak monsters. Debo is the yak monster of the NFL. Debo is I don't care what anybody says. If I had to draft guys based solely on their ability to get yards after the catch, Debo is my 101. So all you have to do is just run a little bubble screen and just let him, Trey Lance just throw it out to him, and Debo does the rest. Trey Lance is the beneficiary of that. You have one of the best yards after catch players at the tight end position in George Kittle. We didn't see much of a Lance to Kittle connection last year, but that doesn't mean that they can use this offseason, that they can't use this offseason to improve on that connection. And then Brandon Ayuk went in the doghouse last year, a coach's decision early on, but still put up similar statistics to his rookie season, despite being in and out of the lineup as a year 2 player. The talent is absolutely there. And then they're one of the most sophisticated rushing offenses in the NFL. Trey Lance is going to benefit from that in a big way. That's pretty much all I got. I don't want to say it's kind of like a wing and a prayer as far as putting Lance this high, but give me the roll of the dice on the Konami code, who is currently cheaper in redraft than those pocket passer quarterbacks that, Rojo, you just kind of alluded to. This will be the last thing I say. I'm just repeating what I already said. Guys like Dak, guys like Stafford, guys like Brady are being drafted ahead of Trey Lance. You guys can take those guys. I'll take Lance a round later. He is my QB7 for fantasy. I am planting my flag.
That is that's a ranking. That's a ranking. I am kind of willing to give you the benefit of the doubt because you've done it once before already with predicting one of these rushing quarterbacks to kind of come out of obscurity, relative obscurity at least, and put up very good numbers.
Yeah.
And I can't dispute that number 1 receiver yards after the catch per target stat that you threw out.
Perfect.
Jimmy G finished QB 17 last year, QB 15 in fantasy points per game with 0 rushing upside.
By doing nothing.
But he did nothing. Have, he did benefit from elite efficiency with his wide receivers. And part of that has to do with the fact that he is an effective passer. We don't know how much of an effective passer Trey Lance is in comparison, but he does come with that rushing upside. He does not have the same amount of rushing upside as some of these other guys ahead of him, though. He was number 5 in carries per game last season, and in his 2 starts, they did seem hesitant to really unleash him fully on the ground, to the point where in one of those starts, the invisible Trey Sermon had, I think, 16 carries in that game. So I think they are going to have training wheels on him. I think he has the upside for the ranking that you're giving him. But I don't know if, by the end of the year, he will be the QB7. I think what you're hoping for is by week 8, week 10, he turns it on, and then for that last stretch of games, he performs as the fantasy QB7. I don't think he has fantasy QB7 overall upside in his first year as a starter, when pretty much every indication has been he still probably needs the training wheels, and Jimmy G is technically still in the conversation to start. Because every report coming out has been the potential is there. We see flashes of greatness from this guy, but the consistency is not. Now, I know from a fantasy perspective, the rushing upside can buoy that greatly. But I can't put him in my top 10 yet, because I do think he does have QB7 overall upside for a stretch of games once he, turns the corner in his development as a starter. I don't know if he comes out the gate hot like that. I'm not going to compare him to Davis Mills because they're completely different quarterbacks, but Davis Mills, it took him a few starts to realize his potential over the last 8 games of the year, and then he turned it on, and we saw that, okay, this guy's a starter. Now, Trey Lance has much more upside, which is why I caveated the beginning of this comparison with it really isn't a comparison on the talent that they bring to the table, but just by nature of the fact that he is a very raw prospect still, and there could very well still be some growing pains with respect to Trey Lance.
Sure.
But he is set up to succeed because he plays with a great head coach in terms of the offense that he puts his offensive playmakers in. Great skill position players. One of the best. Last year, the best skill position group in terms of yards after the catch.
It's a great group. It is a great group of players.
And he has rushing upside, number 5 in carries per game last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and I think Jimmy is gone.
I don't have him in my top 10, but I'm not going to argue with you because you do have a track record of getting your obscure rushing quarterbacks, relative obscurity rushing quarterback rankings right.
If there's anything I'll pat myself on the back for, it's I will say, yeah, I feel like I've done a good job identifying those quarterbacks where their ADP is incredibly affordable, and they're the ones worth pouncing on.
I can't have him over Joe Burrow, and I can't have him. I get if you're real high on him, putting him over Stafford, putting him over Brady. But I can't have him over Dak, can't have him over Burrow.
Oh, I can have him over Dak with ease. Dak was not good last year and lost Amari Cooper. Yeah, I am bullish on Trey Lance. I think he's going to be. Yeah. I think he's going to be a very.
Now that I mean, I'm not going to. The Dak being bad last year, true. I was not factoring in the receivers that he's going to be working with for the.
Yeah, I am bullish on Trey Lance. Dak. I am bullish on Trey Lance. I don't think you need to be. I don't even think you need to be that good of a passer to deliver the goods as a quarterback in fantasy. And Jalen Hurts proved that last year. Yeah, Trey Lance at 7. I feel fine about that. I feel confident about that, and I think he's going to have a big statistical season for San Francisco.
Plant your flag, bro.
The flag is planted. Just for, and then this will be the last thing that I say on this, just to take a look at the ADPs for the quarterbacks, at least on Underdog Fantasy. I mean, Russell Wilson, ADP of 78. Brady, ADP of 82. Trey is actually going ahead of Dak Prescott and Matt Stafford on Underdog Fantasy, but he's going behind Brady. He's going behind Russ. He's going behind Joe Burrow, who I love Joe. He's my QB8. If I can have Trey Lance 85 picks into a draft, I'm doing that every time.
Okay.
I need more Trey Lance shares. Yep. I think he's going to have a very strong season. I do. Johnny, did that answer your question? I didn't forget about it, but Johnny asked a little while ago, what are we thinking about Lance, and then also Kirk Cousins.
We'll get to them.
Yeah.
Let's continue going on this list.
Cousins did make this list. I just want to make sure we get to questions in the chat. I would not trade away, depending, Johnny. I mean, I don't know the details about what your discussion is about your trade talks, but I'm not looking to trade away Trey Lance.
No, not at all.
If it's a great return,
I'm looking
obviously,
to get him.
Yeah,
I'm not looking to trade him away.
I'm looking to buy low on Trey Lance. There was a report today about how they're working on his throwing motion and it led to arm fatigue. These are not baseball pitchers. There's no such thing as arm fatigue for a quarterback. Like, buy the dip. That if that drives his price down even further, buy it.
Yeah.
Buy the dip.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Buy the dip. I'm not worried about Trey Lance in the slightest. I'm really not. Maybe I'm too bullish on him. But
I think you are too bullish on him. But again, I'm not going to fight you on that because you've been right in the past.
I've been too bullish on Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts before, and that worked out. So, yeah, I will sink with my quarterback ship if I have to. Trey Lance, QB7. And then what do you have here?
I had Jalen Hurts there. I had Burrow at 6.
You have Burrow 6, Hurts 7. And then I have Burrow at 8. Who's your QB8?
I have Russell Wilson at 8.
Okay. I think he's my QB9. He is.
People are forgetting how good Russell Wilson is, man.
They probably are. Recency bias is a hell of a thing.
Yeah. That's the nature of the beast is Russell Wilson is real good. And he's been given the short end, playing with the short end of the stick for a while now in Seattle. Prior to last season, he was the QB6 in fantasy points per game for 2 years running. And then last season, he took a step back because halfway through the season, he got a hand injury that they rushed him back from. And then on the last half of the season, had no rapport seemingly with his number 1 wide receiver, which is like, it just got weird. But prior to last season, where he finished in fantasy points per game, the QB 13, he was the QB 6 in back-to-back years, and he has been the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy points per game if we're going all the way back to 2017. I really like Russell Wilson with him moving to Denver. Number 5 in deep ball attempts last year. That bodes well for the Cortland Suttons, the Tim Patricks, and even the dare I say, the KJ Hamlers of the world.
Well, don't forget Judy, but yeah.
Yeah, well, deep ball. Judy is not a deep ball receiver.
Judy could go do it. But yes, KJ Hamler, the next great thing. You heard it here first.
Number 1 in air yards per attempt. So he was letting it fly last year, just not connecting on the other end. Number 5 in yards per attempt, 19 in carries, 18 in rush yards. That's where his value dipped last season. He was not rushing the ball as much as he had in the past on the ground, and they were not utilizing him as such. And that, when combined with the fact that he was coming back from a broken hand that was not fully healed when they brought him back in, led to the QB 13 in fantasy points per game. But in 2020, he was 7th in carries to 2021's 19th. And in 2020, he was 4th in rush yards compared to 18th last season. So if he just gets back to his 2020 numbers, he has top 6 upside. And that's not taking into account that he's playing with a much better supporting cast on the offensive side of the ball. He's playing with the best duo of rushers in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, both guys who can get it done through the air and on the ground. He's playing with one of the most complete wide receiver rooms of his career. He usually only had, he had one deep threat and one do-it-all guy, historically. Going back to Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin, and then Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. It was a 1-2 punch. Now it goes 3 deep with Sutton, Judy, Tim Patrick, because Tim Patrick is comparable to a Tyler Boyd like player, where I mean, if given the chance to be a number 2, he could probably put up 1,000 yards receiving. I really like Russell Wilson, and I think people aren't giving him the respect he deserves, considering his track record, considering he's only 33 years old, I believe. Is he 33?
Yeah, he's 33.
He's 33. He's turning 34 this year, but still.
That's not old for a quarterback.
Yeah, he still has a good 6 years in the league. And yes, his rushing totals might continue to dip relative to where they were 2 years ago, but he should still be able to do better on the ground than he did last season. To your point about rushing quarterbacks, Russell Wilson was the prototype for rushing quarterbacks for a long time before Lamar Jackson came on the scene. Russell Wilson was that guy. That's how he got to QB1 overall finish in 2017. He's not getting back to that level of production on the ground, but he can get back to where he was 2 years ago. I really like Russell Wilson, man.
I mean, last year was his lowest rushing attempt totals for a season by almost 25 rush attempts.
Yeah.
And last year was only the second time he didn't run at least 70 times in a season. Missing time will do that. I also think, this is call it a hunch or no proof to confirm this or whatever. I think Russ was preserving his body by the end of the season last year when the team had completely mailed it in. And the only other time he didn't eclipse 70 rush attempts on the ground was 2018. That season, he had the second most passing touchdowns of his career. So, it was still, buoyed by big passing totals. I don't think he had a ton of passing yards that year, but 35 passing scores will get it done. no matter how you slice it. So, yeah, people are having some recency bias on how good Russ is. Now he goes to a situation where I don't care what the personnel is. Seattle has been notorious for neglecting their offensive line during Russ's tenure up there. So Denver's offensive line, there's no way they're not better than what the Seahawks have been deploying during Russ's tenure. And it's a deep collection of of weapons in the passing game. And he gets out from the archaic coaching approach of 70-year-old fossil Pete Carroll. And his ass backwards coaching approach. So, and not to mention Seattle as a franchise in general. They chose archaic Pete Carroll over Hall of Famer Russell Wilson. I digress. Russ is free. Russ is going to get the opportunity to cook this year. And if history is any indication, Russ is going to get back up to that 70 rush attempt floor. That has been something that has been a part of his, and he's topped 90 rushing attempts at least 5 times in his career. 4 times, sorry. No, 5 times. He has eclipsed 90 rush attempts 5 times in his career. He's several years removed from that, but even in 2019 and 2020, 75 rush attempts, 83 rushing attempts, 5 total touchdowns across both of those seasons. So he's usually a good bet for chipping in 2, 3, 4 touchdowns on the ground.
People are straight disrespecting Russell Wilson, who should be playing in the best offense of his career, and it's weird.
Yeah, and probably with the coaching staff that's going to give him the most free reign of his career.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I agree. I guess there are some younger quarterbacks with quote unquote fresher legs who are a little bit more unproven passers that I'm willing to roll the dice on, that I do have ranked ahead of Russ. But I do have him as my QB9. You have him as your QB8, so not too far away. It's not hard to vouch for Russ from a fantasy perspective. He is more expensive than Trey Lance, and I just got done mentioning that I would prefer to take Trey Lance at his ADP. But with an ADP around 80, you are hardly breaking the bank, and with his receivers going around in the fourth,
it's one of the easier
round,
stacks to create.
Not hard to build a stack. Yep, it's
with
not
him,
hard
with
to build
one
a
of the
Denver
receivers
stack.
and Alberto.
Yeah,
and
Alberto.
Melvin Gordon.
Yep.
Like you could kind of complete the set with him and not
KJ
have to pay.
Hamler. I'm just kidding.
Shut up. Get out of here. Oh my god. All right, but you have who do you have at QB8?
Yeah, the Denver.
That was Joe Burrow.
QB8 is where I had Burrow. QB9 is where I have Russ.
Okay.
So actually, I guess the floor remains. I agree with Russ. There's not too many reservations. I guess the reason for having him at the QB9 is a little bit recency bias. It is a new offense, so if we're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes having to acclimate with different players, we do have to account for Russ doing that in an entirely new offense and scheme. He has no continuity with teammates, whereas someone like Mahomes does, at least with a guy like Kelsey. So we do have to factor that in. We do have to, if we're gonna ding guys for that, then that's something that we have to factor in for Russ. It is an entirely new system, an entirely new offense, entirely new playmakers and players that he is playing with. So there can be some lumps that can happen in that situation. We've seen it with quarterbacks in year 1 of a system before. So I'm not going to move him up, but you bring up a lot of solid points of why it's perfectly fine, perfectly safe to invest in Russ this year. I might actually prefer Russ next year a little bit more when he does have that season under his belt in the same system, when there's some continuity next year. But Russ has done plenty in his career to deserve a top 10 ranking. I have him in my top 10. He's probably a little undervalued this year. So yeah, he is my QB9. So I guess I pass it back to you to see who your guy is at 9.
Well, I shuffled around my rankings a little bit.
Okay.
Because it was warranted. And honestly,
I was
you talked me into Trey Lance a little bit. You did.
Hey.
So I had to move Trey Lance up.
There we go.
I was not factoring in for some reason. It skipped my mind when I was making my rankings after work today. To ding Dak Prescott for not having Amari Cooper, plus not having Gallup for the first start of his the start of the year.
And wasn't great statistically last year when
he was still QB9 in
both
fantasy points per game. So I'm not gonna ding. I'm not gonna ding him that much.
He was fine, but he was being drafted last year, I think, as like the QB6. So relative to those expectations, he did not deliver.
He was still the fantasy quarterback, the quarterback 7 in fantasy and the QB9 in fantasy points per game.
Still good,
but,
still very good.
You know, in the year before when he had those 5 starts, he was the QB1 in points per game in those 5 starts. So that's why people were drafting him at that point. But it doesn't matter. We're not talking about Dak Prescott yet. Because I am now putting Trey Lance at QB9.
There you go.
You talked me into it. And you were right in the past, so I'm not going to have him all the way up at 7, but I do have him up at 9.
There you go. Okay. So QB 10. Sorry, I'm just checking the chat. Okay, we're caught up. Awesome. We're just going to keep this. We're going to keep this rolling.
Yes, sir.
My QB 10 is our Super Bowl winning quarterback this year, and that is Matthew Stafford of the LA Rams. There's, I feel like, not too much that needs to be said here. Stafford had a career renaissance getting traded to the Rams. All he did was win the damn Super Bowl. Let's see. What do we got here? Well, first of all, we already know about his weapons. He's got a deep collection of pass catching talent to throw to, which they might still add to. If Odell is able to make a midseason comeback, he has been favored to return to the Rams. Stafford is not a threat to run the ball, but sometimes that just straight up doesn't matter, because when you throw the ball 600 times and are a threat for 5,000 passing yards and 40 touchdowns, or let's say at least 35, you are going to deliver the goods from a perspective of a low-end QB1. Actually, I think he was better than a low-end QB1 last year.
No, he was the QB5 overall.
So there you go. That is maybe his ceiling, just because he does not deliver anything on the ground. You're never going to see Stafford finish probably, as a top 3 quarterback. He would have to put up astronomically good numbers as a passer, and that's just difficult to do. Be that as it may, he's got an MVP caliber player in Cooper Kupp. He adds, they replace essentially Odell Beckham with a healthy Allen Robinson, and probably a motivated Allen Robinson.
I'd rather have Allen Robinson as my number 2 than Robert Woods, and I'd rather have, right now at this point in their careers, Allen Robinson over Odell as my number 2 as well.
A couple of ACL injuries will do that, although Odell is still would pose maybe the best number 3 receiver ever if he did come back for even half of a season.
Antonio Brown pre crazy would like to have a say about that.
He would like to have a word. Yeah, true. He'd be up there. Odell would be up there. It would be one of the deepest collections of pass catching talent that's been accumulated in recent history. So the weapons are a little top heavy, right? It's Kupp and Robinson, and then Van Jefferson is there, who did perform like a wide receiver 3 last year. Tyler Higbee has been a low end tight end over the past couple of seasons. They did throw the ball a little bit to Darrell Henderson. We'll see what Cam Akers can do, going back to taking that starting role. He didn't catch the ball much when he was finally entrenched as the starter late as a rookie.
They threw it out to him. His big play last season when he came back from the injury was a catch. Cam Akers, that's one thing he can do, is he can operate as a pass catcher out of the backfield.
He can do it. I feel like they didn't do it like that frequent.
No, they didn't. That's not usually part of their game plan.
Yeah, I mean, so that is that takes away from Stafford's potential numbers.
No, I don't think so, because they push it down the field. They're not passing it to the running backs because they're passing it to Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. So when you have Cooper Kupp, you throw him the ball.
I don't know how much I'm gonna discount Stafford for
I
not
guess
passing to his running backs when he's passing to his wide receivers.
Yeah. Well,
where I will discount him this season is no Andrew Whitworth, and their O-line is not good.
Deal.
Their O-line is not good.
Deal.
But he does have the best passing duo, I believe, of his career. I mean, it's hard to say that when you're talking about Calvin Johnson and Marvin Jones, but I think if you can say that about any duo of wide receivers, it's probably the one that he's working with this season. He was number 8 in pass attempts last year, number 3 in red zone attempts, number 2 in passing touchdowns, number 3 in yards per attempt. I expect all those numbers to carry over to this season. There's no reason to expect them not to. The loss of Andrew Whitworth, it will be something it will be felt. It will be something to monitor this season. And he does bring nothing on the ground, but he brings everything through the air. I fully expect him to get another 4,700 yard plus season and 35 plus touchdowns, and again be a top 10 quarterback. Will he get to QB5 at the end of the season? No, because I think a lot of that was predicated on Kyler Murray dropping and Lamar Jackson falling out of the top 10 and Russell Wilson falling out of the top 10 and things like that. So, but I do believe, QB 10 is right in line with basically his median.
Where we can, where all things equal, where we can expect him to end up.
Right.
Yeah. It's an innovative offense, a great offensive mind, and Sean McVay calling the shots. I think that is an intangible where that it's good enough to overcome maybe some potential shortcomings on the offensive line. And unlike my concerns about the Super Bowl loser, I have no concerns about the Super Bowl winner. I never do. So they're going to be riding momentum from the perspective of running it back. That's an intangible that I think is, going to be a motivator for a guy like Stafford. And Cooper Kupp, I mean, for whatever this is worth, I don't know how much stock we put into this, but Kupp had a season good enough where he should have probably won the MVP award. And he didn't. He was snubbed because he's not a quarterback. Does he, including playoffs, get close to 2,000 yards again? I don't know about that, but
1,700 I think is well
maybe a little motivator. Like maybe a little motivator, right? I didn't win MVP last year, and I sure as hell should have. I don't know. Maybe that's sure
1,700 is the new 1,600. We saw Julio Jones get to that number consistently. And I think that is in the realm of possibility for Cooper Kupp for sure, with another year, with another game added to the schedule every year. So 1,700 yards.
And then you add a veteran in Allen Robinson, who is maybe the most motivated of all on this offense because he was not part of the championship last year and now gets the best quarterback unquestionably, far and away, not even close, of his career. So
2019 and 2020 wide receiver 12 with the Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky. So So wheels up for Matthew Stafford, continuing to put up big passing numbers. He is my QB 10. He is mine too. And my QB 11 was the guy who finished last year as the QB 3.
Father Time has not gotten him yet.
I have Tom Brady.
This is also where I have Brady.
Number 1 in pass attempts. And while I don't think he gets to 716 or whatever it was pass attempts again, because that was
ridiculous amount
insane.
Year.
And that is in one more game than usual, but still. You know who holds the record?
Is it Peyton?
No, man, it's Matt Stafford on the Lions.
Matty Staff on the Lions in 16 games
with Calvin Johnson. But Tom Brady,
I would throw the ball
5,316 yards passing, 43 touchdowns, was number 3 in fantasy points per game, and finished as the QB3 overall. Number 1 in pass attempts. I don't expect that to change. Over the past 3 seasons, he has been at least the 4th most passing quarterback in the league. Last year, he was number 2. The year before that, he was number 4. So while he's been on the Bucs, he has he has passed for the second most and the most pass attempts in the league. So even if he drops back a little bit, even if he passes the ball 40 less times, which is, I think, reasonable to suggest, because they brought in a young running back and they don't have Godwin for half the year. They don't have a third wide receiver who's as good as Antonio Brown. But 40 less pass attempts over a 17-game span, he would still have led the league last year. So just insane numbers. His offenses are predicated on him holding the ball and distributing it to his pass catchers.
Yep.
That's not going to change. He was number 1 in protection rate last year, and he lost Alex Kappa and Ali Marpet. So that is a hit that he is going to have to navigate.
Yep.
But he was going to navigate that with the ball in his hands. That's just what he does.
Yeah, if there's one guy where I look at like the offensive line and be like, well, it's fine. It's Brady.
Yeah, I mean, number 1 in pass yards, number 1 in air yards, number 1 in passing touchdowns. Should take a step back with the worse O-line. No Gronk and no Godwin for at least the first 8 games. But both of those guys could and maybe will come back by week 8, and then he finishes the last 10 games of the season on a tear, like Tom Brady usually does. So yeah, Tom Brady, quarterback 11, despite finishing number 3 last year. I think that's reasonable.
To that point that you just made about maybe like a second half stretch, Brady feels like a prime guy to pass on in drafts this year, but try to buy low maybe like a month or so into the season. Because the reason I can't put him higher despite his phenomenal finish last year is because of, it's not the offensive line. You just mentioned it. It's the weapons.
Right.
Godwin is expected to miss at least the first month. Antonio Brown is gone. Gronkowski is retired for now. I think a lot of people are holding out, and I would say there's very few people who are convinced that Gronk is gone for good. He could be, but there are. I would imagine there's the window or the door is still open for Gronk to return. That being said, Brady will be, for at least the first month of the season, throwing the ball to Mike Evans and Russell Gage and Leonard Fournette. Outside of that, I mean, the ancillary pieces are Scotty Miller, Ty Johnson, and Cameron Brate. So,
which, I mean, he has made it work with
He's made it work before with less.
Last year, the year before last year, when Scotty Miller was basically a full-time player in the offense and was a wide receiver 3/wide receiver 4 for your fantasy team, he finished quarterback 10. He finished quarterback 10 with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Scotty Miller.
Yeah. So QB 11 feels appropriate with Mike Evans, Russell Gage, and we're waiting for Godwin to get back. Maybe, hopefully, by say week 6, week 7, we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. So yeah, to that point, I can't put him higher than where we have him, QB 11. I don't envision myself having a ton of Brady shares this year just because I can get Trey Lance later than him. There are some QB2s that I prefer a little bit more than him. I do like their upside a little bit more, but out of respect for what he has done and who he is, I do have Brady as my QB 11. He feels like a great, like I mentioned, I'm gonna pass on him in drafts, and if he fails to meet expectations by week 5 or 6, depending on the format and situation, could be a great buy low candidate for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add to that.
He's Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. He's the GOAT.
Who's your QB 12?
There's not much more to be said. This could be also a little bit contested, like it was, like my Trey Lance ranking. But my QB 12 is Derek Carr.
Okay, I have him QB 14.
Okay, so he made your list maybe a couple of spots lower. Yeah, I have Derek Carr over Dak, and I have Derek Carr over Aaron Rodgers. This is kind of simple. Derek Carr's got the deepest collection of pass-catching talent of his career, and the piece that they added is one of the premier wide receivers in the NFL in Davante Adams, who, take this with a grain of salt if you want to. And, I don't know how much stock I put into it, but they were teammates in college. And now obviously a decade or so has passed since then, but they've worked together before. So something to be said for that. Carr, I think we've been pretty vocal on this channel, being one of the upper echelon quarterbacks at the position based on, what he has done thus far in his career. Doesn't do much in the in the rushing department. And the offensive line is still very much a work in progress. But when healthy, and if they're able to stay healthy, Davante Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow is a pretty damn good trio of weapons at your disposal. It's a high-octane passing offense. That should stay the same with the addition of Davante Adams. Not to mention the new scheme that's getting brought in with Josh McDaniels. I feel much better about this offense's chances than I do under John Gruden. That's pretty much all I got. It's just for me, is Aaron Rodgers a better quarterback than Derek Carr? Obviously. Does Dak Prescott offer some more intangibles than Derek Carr? Yeah, probably. But Derek Carr's got far and away at this point of the quarterbacks that we're ranking, Derek Carr's got the best group of weapons. I think maybe like a 4,500 yard season is well within his range of outcomes.
He had 4,800 yards last year. I don't think the yardage is in question. I think the touchdown numbers are in question for him. Now, he does have one of the premier touchdown catching wide receivers in the league out there now.
Yeah, he does.
He had 23 passing touchdowns last year. Expect that to jump by at least 8, I would say.
Yeah, I think a 10, with a guy like Davante Adams, I think a 10 touchdown.
I'm not going to go all out and say that because I do think it was a match made in heaven with him and Aaron Rodgers, and they did have build that rapport over years.
Sure.
And going 10 years without working somebody and then having albeit him being a good friends and them working on the offseason and stuff, but going 10 years without working with somebody is a long time.
Yeah, no.
So yes, they have rapport from college.
That, yeah.
I don't know how much stock I can put into that storyline.
Yeah, I said
it's
take
more
it with
of
a grain
character
of salt.
rapport thing than an on the field thing. I'll believe that when I see it. But
right.
He was number 5 in pass attempts last year. And full disclosure, I have Derek Carr at QB 14. Number 5 in pass attempts last year. Number 5 in passing yards. Number 5 in air yards. Number 2 in accuracy rating, which is kind of impressive. I wasn't a stat I was expecting to read when I went to Derek Carr's player profiler page. Number 10 in red zone attempts, so that number should climb a little bit. He was QB 16 last year, with some depleted weapons because he didn't have Waller for much of the season and lost Henry Ruggs, right? Didn't have any connection with Bryan Edwards, so it was a little bit rough, but he made it work.
Kenyon Drake was their pass-catching back. He went down middle of the season.
Towards the end of the season, but yes.
Yeah, they lost. Their offensive line was awful. So, yeah.
But he was QB 13 in fantasy by fantasy finish, QB 16 by fantasy points per game, QB 20 by fantasy points per game the year before last year. I think he can jump another 2 spots. I think he can jump, even if all goes well, he can jump more than that. But I am being slightly conservative with Derek Carr. I do like the weapons. It remains to be seen if the rapport is with him and Davante Adams will be anywhere near as good as it was with Aaron Rodgers. Remember, Aaron Rodgers literally didn't have any other targets. You look in this offense, there are other mouths to feed in this offense. There is a Darren Waller. There is a Hunter Renfrow. Aaron Rodgers really didn't have that. It was all Davante Adams at all times over the course of the last 2 seasons.
Over the past couple seasons, yeah.
Davante Adams has 29 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons because he was literally the only person Aaron Rodgers looked to 3/4 of the time when Aaron Rodgers had the ball in his hands. That's not going to be the way that Derek Carr operates. So I do not expect Davante Adams to have 18 touchdown upside I think he would be lucky
No.
to get to 10. I think it hovers in between 8 and 10 because I am being conservative, because he is going to be passing to a Waller. He is going to be passing to a Renfro. He is. But I like Derek Carr more than I've liked him at any other point in his career. So I don't want that to detract from how I view him. I do view him as a very good quarterback who is ascending despite being, just kind of up there in age. He's been in the league at least he's in his 30s. He's been in the league
for a little while, yeah.
And usually quarterbacks don't appreciate over time the way that Derek Carr has. He is a little bit of an outlier in that respect. But I do think this will be his best season as a pro.
Yeah.
I can't debate the QB 12 ranking. I just have him 2 spots below.
Yeah, right. It's not like you're like, he's not in my top 16. Then I might be like,
he's firmly in there.
Right. Yeah. I
have him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, just like you.
Yeah, I have him ahead of Rodgers. And it's at this point, he has been good enough for me to consider the fact that at this point of our rankings, his collection of pass catchers is so significantly deeper than anybody else at this point that I'm willing to roll the dice on him a little bit and rank him my official kind of last QB1 as the QB12.
There you go.
Yeah, I think Carr's in for a good season pass throwing the ball. So that's my QB12. Who's your QB12?
I had Dak Prescott up a little higher because I was misranking him based off of, again, him not having I wasn't factoring in him not having Amari Cooper and and Gallup for the first half of the season. But this is where I have Dak Prescott.
Okay. I have Dak as my QB 13, so 1 spot lower.
Dak, there's a lot you can say to detract from his value. Yes, no Amari Cooper. Yes, no Gallup for half the season. I feel like he didn't have Gallup for half the season last year either.
Gallup got hurt it's like week 14 or 15, somewhere around there. He got hurt at the end of the season.
Yeah, but he disappeared for long stretches last year as well.
He got hurt week 1. Gallup got hurt week 1 and missed he might have missed like 6 weeks. Yeah. So he was without Gallup for a time to start the season last year and to end the season.
Dak Prescott, QB9 last year in fantasy points per game, QB7 overall. A year before, in 5 starts, he was the QB1 in fantasy points per game in a small sample size. But 5th in pass attempts last year, 2nd in pace of play, which is a big factor in me ranking him ahead of guys like Carr, because he's going to run more plays in the same amount of time than the other quarterbacks behind him, and I like that for fantasy. 2nd in red zone completion percentage, 7th in catchable pass rate, 14th in carries, 1 rushing touchdown. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he too was coming back from leg injury, one of the most public leg injuries in football over the last few seasons. So that had a lot to do, I believe, with his carries dipping to 14th in the league and him only having 1 rushing touchdown. 146 rush yards last season was his lowest total. In 2020, he had 93 rushing yards in 5 games. And he had 146 all season last year. That number's going to go up. And I know that you put a premium on the rushing aspect of
I think he's going to run more this
quarterbacks'
year,
games. The year before that, 277 rush yards. The year before that, 305 rush yards. The year before that, 357 rush yards. So he's never going to be a guy that's going to get to 500 rush yards, but he can put up a solid, 350 rush yard number and rush more than for more than 1 rushing touchdown. Again, he had 3 in 2020 in 5 games. Hot stretch should be due for some regression in that respect with respect to those numbers. But, he can, I think 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, he can get there, and that'll buoy his numbers. He should take a step back as a passer considering his pass catchers, but he should take a step forward as a rusher. And Pollard is the number 1 running back in terms of routes run, and Zeke is number 2.
Yeah, so the running backs will be involved.
The running backs are going to be involved. Schultz is going to be involved, and Schultz was the tight end 3 last year. So, yeah, you can point to weapons lost, but there are enough weapons who are still good enough to get it done with, Lamb, with them drafting Jalen Tolbert, who I like. I think they'll be able to stay afloat while Gallup is gone, and then when Gallup comes in, I'm not going to say it's Dak Prescott to the moon.
It's a boost, though.
But it is a boost, and by that point, I do expect Prescott to put up top 10 numbers because that's what he does perennially. When he has a full cadre of skill position players all healthy, he puts up QB top 10 numbers. He does. Up until that point with Gallup, it's probably more like QB 14, and then once he steps in with all of his weapons, should be well within the top 10, and that to me evens out to top 12 finish. QB 12 for me, Dak Prescott feels about right.
Yeah, so Dak's body of work is definitely enough for me to feel like he might be a little, like I have him a little low, ranking him as the QB 13. So there is that caveat. I will say 2 things about his potential for running the ball. One in his favor and one where I'm a little concerned. And honestly, maybe you can also attribute this to Russ a little bit. The glass half full is now he is a full year. Dak is removed from that nasty ankle injury that he suffered to week 5 of 2020.
Yeah.
So he's last year. You could maybe understand a little bit. I always say this with any player. The first year back from a significant injury, you have to temper expectations a little bit. And I think we saw that last year. Dak was probably a little more hesitant to run immediately coming back from the injury. Now he's a year removed from a year returning. That's a feather in his cap to potentially run more. The glass half empty is there is a natural trend where as quarterbacks get older, they run less.
Yes.
That is just a thing.
But he's not yet 30. He's 28, turning 29 very soon. But
he's turning 29. There is enough. It's not like I'm saying this where he's like a 26-year-old, right? He is a little older. Dak has been in the league since when was he drafted? 2016. So 6-7 years in the league now. So yeah, it's not like he's a fossil and he's not going to be a statue. Just want to point out there is a trend. There is evidence that suggests veteran quarterbacks run less, even ones that have made it a staple of their game early in their careers. So we weren't already, like you already mentioned, we weren't expecting 500 rushing yards from Dak to begin with. If he gets in that 200 to 300 yard range, I would call that a win. And if he gets 2 to 3 touchdowns on the ground, I would call that a win. That's a good contribution. That's a solid contribution on the ground.
Yeah, I'm not expecting the world from him on the ground.
No. But because I'm not expecting that much more than that, coupled with the potential handicap he's dealing with fewer weapons in the passing game, plus relative to expectations, something of a down season last year, could I sneak him into that QB 11, QB 12 range? Did guys like Trey Lance maybe push him down where it's like this guy's unproven and Dak has the body of work? Sure, maybe. And Derek Carr, like guys like Derek Carr and Trey Lance are those guys where it's like you wouldn't rank them ahead of Dak otherwise. But there are situations that come up each year where it's like these are the guys I'm a little bit more willing to roll the dice on. So Dak is one who maybe gets knocked down a couple of pegs. QB 13, deserving of a QB1 ranking, but there are enough intangibles that I'm a little concerned about with him for this year, plus some intangibles that I like for other guys, maybe more unproven guys this year, where that's just the way the cookie has crumbled. So I got Dak as my QB 13. So one spot below you. He's absolutely on that low-end QB1 conversation. and depending on injuries or underperformance, he can still get there. But going into the season, I do have him ranked as a QB 13. I don't expect to have too many shares of him this year for 2022.
Yeah, I don't expect to have too many shares of him either, but I do like him a little bit more than you this year. And I feel like I have historically just been a slightly more of a Dak Prescott fan than you have.
That's probably the one I got the most wrong last year. I did like Dak at his cost last year, and
I did
ultimately too. I liked it. I liked Dak at his cost last year because I could get him in like the 7th round. He was good, but unfortunately, he wasn't good enough for that to have paid dividends.
We finished QB 7, so he wasn't bad. He just didn't meet expectations.
He broke even, and for me, that's a loss.
Yeah. See. All right. So the next guy that I have at QB 13, Kirk Cousins.
Over A-Rod. Wow. Hunter's asking us where Aaron Rodgers is.
I have A-Rod down at 15, and we'll get there, man.
I got him at 14, but anyway, yeah. I got Kirk at 15.
Speaking of liking a guy who has the weapons over the guy that doesn't.
It's Kirk Cousins over
Kirk
Aaron
Cousins.
Rodgers. Yeah.
Kirk Cousins. QB 12 last year. The year before that, QB 11. So he's been a rock solid low end QB 2 over the course of his career, but he's had to deal with what?
High end QB 2.
A low end QB 1. I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Did I say QB 2?
Yeah, sorry.
Low end QB 2. Yeah, Hunter, just hear me out. Number 2 in deep ball attempts. Number 10 in pass attempts. No, number 1 in pressured throws. And they got a guard in the 2nd round.
We'll take
number
it.
9 in passing touchdowns. Number 5 in adjusted air yards per attempt. And with all those stats listed, specifically number 2 in deep ball attempts, under a coaching staff that historically hasn't been a coaching staff that opens the offense up. Now they're playing with the coaching staff that is opening the offense up. Every skill position player in that offense has been very vocal about how good this is going to be for their stats this year, for their offense this year, and how it'll be something that they really haven't seen from this offense. Adam Thielen, who's been a pro for the Vikings for 8 years, has said that he has never played in an offense that is this wide open with respect to getting the ball to their playmakers in space through the air. So I'm willing to believe that. Yep. He's been a low-end QB1 despite that. He was QB 11 last year, playing with these same weapons, has an upgrade, I believe, at tight end, going from Tyler Conklin to Irv Smith. Every other skill position spot is the same. KJ Osborne should take a step forward just as a wide receiver.
KJ Osborne this year. Yep.
So Kirk Cousins, it feels weird just to rank him behind where he finished last season, despite all of that. But all that to say, I like him more than I like Derek Carr, just because now I think their weapons are comparable. And I like Kirk Cousins more than I like Derek Carr, even though I like Derek Carr very much. Again, one spot within variance of each other. Kirk Cousins QB 13, Derek Carr I have at 14, getting a little ahead of myself there. But I mean, Kirk Cousins, this is the year that we have been kind of waiting for. And it's going to be great for Justin Jefferson, going to be great for Adam Thielen, going to be great for Dalvin Cook, going to be great for Irv Smith. All that to say, is going to be great for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins QB 13.
Yeah, I have him at 15, and honestly, it's kind of hard for me to justify it because I've been so bullish on the Vikings this offseason and have been pounding the table to draft your Vikings for all of the reasons you just mentioned. I wanted to move Kirk Cousins higher. I do have Aaron Rodgers just one spot ahead of him, and I guess that's more of like a respect to Aaron Rodgers and who he is.
No, I'm being realistic.
Kirk Cousins has been, to your point, a low-end QB1 with the Vikings, and I'm very excited about this offense. I've been more vocal about my expectations of the Vikings offense, I think, than any other team this offseason.
Yeah. I'd say so.
So I might need to move Kirk Cousins around a little bit. I could see myself putting him ahead of guys like Dak, maybe guys like Derek Carr. I don't know if I could move him ahead of Brady and up, but Cousins has delivered the goods as far as a rock solid, consistent performer at the quarterback position for several years running now. I know the conversation about him as an NFL quarterback is something that has left Vikings fans, wanting more, but that's not the conversation that we are having here today, right now.
Chill, Hunter. I'll get to it. Don't worry. You'll see where I'm coming from in a second.
He's charged up. He's charged up.
Oh,
so
man.
No, I can see this. I can absolutely see this. And Cousins has been rock solid for his career, has great weapons to throw to, and we are believers in the switch in offensive philosophy that the Vikings have undergone this offseason. I have Cousins at 15. I do right now, as it currently stands, I do have Rodgers ranked ahead of him at 14. But it's not hard to throw your weight behind Kirk Cousins' potential for this season. So, yeah.
Yeah. And at 14, who did you have?
This is where I have Aaron Rodgers.
All right. I had Derek Carr there. We've already spoken about Derek Carr.
So we talked about Carr. I'm a little more ambitious on Carr. I could honestly see
we
myself
already spoke about Carr. We don't need to talk about Carr.
Yeah, no, I know.
Let's get to this Aaron Rodgers discussion so that
we
we at least let Honor L know where we're coming from. And would you let me go first with this? I just want to
go for it.
Because I have him lower than you. I feel like I have to justify why I have him lower than you.
Okay.
Despite, back-to-back two MVPs.
Yeah.
He is ranked as my QB 15. Last year, he was number 1 in adjusted air yards per attempt. 12th in pass attempts, though. 11th in deep ball attempts. 10th in passing yards. 4th in touchdowns. Because he had one of the premier connections with a elite wide receivers for touchdown scoring in recent memory. Davante Adams, over the last 2 seasons where Aaron Rodgers was an MVP, has had 29 touchdowns over that span. Pretty crazy. I would dare say historic. But he doesn't have that anymore. And the team replaced one of the best, if not the best, pure touchdown scorer in the league with a rookie.
Yeah.
And not a highly touted one.
Right. A project.
A project and a another project in Romeo Doubs and a has been in Sammy Watkins.
Oof.
And I'm sorry, dude. Oof. And I'm a Packers fan. Half my family lives in Wisconsin. Half my extended family lives in Wisconsin.
You can get on the Packers bandwagon, yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, the one knock on him is the fact that he plays conservative because he seems to be so worried about throwing interceptions to the point where he'll throw for 37 touchdowns and only have 4 interceptions, which is insane. It's insane efficiency. It's efficiency that we have never seen before.
Well, that's a testament to him.
It's a testament to him, but on top of that, he does get conservative at times. And that has led to him not going as far as he should have in certain moments in the playoffs, losing to the Jimmy G's of the world when, that has happened. Not only once. He's losing the guy that he scored 29 touchdowns with over the last 2 seasons. So that number 4 in touchdown in touchdown passes comes down. He could still be, around number 10 in passing yards, number 11 in deep ball attempts, number 12 in pass attempts. I don't really expect that to change. But I want to take us back to 2019. When Davante Adams,
that's how I feel, yeah.
When Davante Adams had only 5 touchdowns. Now, not in a full slate of games.
He got hurt,
I think it was 12 games, but 5 touchdowns.
didn't have a Devontae Adams year that year.
Rodgers finished as the QB 14 in fantasy points per game in that year.
I think that's what kind of along what we're
and he had Devontae Adams for 12 games.
Right.
So I'm taking Devontae Adams out. I'm putting in a rookie. I'm putting in a holdover in Allen Lazard, who I like more than most, but call a spade. Allen Lazard hasn't been a starter who has, and inspired the confidence that a Devontae Adams has or anything close. Sammy Watkins, a rookie, 2 rookies, a guy that really did nothing last year, and Amari Rodgers. And the guy that we're most hype about in the offense is a tight end coming back from an injury who might not be ready week 1. I'm just being realistic, Hunter. I love Aaron Rodgers. He's been one of my favorite quarterbacks of the past 10 years.
He's one of the best ever.
He's one of the best ever. I've been to Lambeau Field with my grandpa when I was young. That was my first football experience. Half of my family lives in Wisconsin. I'd go visit them every year. My second favorite team is the Packers, but you got to be realistic with your squad. Rodgers is going to take a step back. He's not going to be MVP candidate Rodgers without Devontae Adams. It's just not within the realm of the range of outcomes for him. We expect a step forward for Cousins, and I expect a major step back for Rodgers.
And let's make this
clear. He will still be hyper efficient on a play-to-play basis.
The Packers will still win the division. Like let's not mince words here. This is not like an NFL quarterback discussion.
This is a fantasy discussion.
Yeah. I agree with the notion that we're looking at more of a statistical season along the lines of 2019. Like, yeah, is Rodgers going to throw the ball more than 500 times? Yeah, he's Aaron MF and Rodgers. Like he's going to throw the ball.
You can say
he's going to throw the ball for over 500 times. He's going to he should get 4,000 passing yards. I don't know if he eclipses 25 passing scores. We are very bullish on Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon this year. I think both of those guys are going to feast. But that's going to come at the expense of the actual numbers that Aaron Rodgers puts up. This is still a Green Bay Packers team that is probably going to win 11 games, 12 games.
Yeah, has nothing to do with their win totals.
Right.
This is a fantasy and a numbers discussion.
And there's not really much of an argument here. Kirk Cousins' weapons are better than Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot of quarterbacks who have better weapons than Aaron Rodgers does. That doesn't mean I don't believe Aaron Rodgers can't get it done from a win-loss perspective.
And we've never seen Aaron Rodgers have weapons this
thin.
Yeah, that's the word.
This thin. Yeah, so we'll see how he does. I don't have less confidence in him to be able to deliver wins for the Green Bay Packers this year. But what I do have a concern with is if he's my QB1 in fantasy, what are his final numbers going to look like? I have my reservations there. Can he throw for 25 touchdowns because it's Aaron Rodgers? Sure, he can do that in his sleep. But I think a lot of the production this year is going to be funneled to the running backs. Doesn't mean that Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Jones can't catch 65 balls and Dillon might chip in 25 to 30 catches himself. But these are not going to be huge throws down the field where the receivers are making big plays, and Rodgers is tossing 35, 40 touchdowns. I think it's more along the lines of 25 touchdowns. The weapons just don't instill the confidence from a fantasy perspective where I want to invest in Aaron Rodgers in 2022. Would I put my money on them winning the division and winning a playoff game? Of course. Would I bank on Aaron Rodgers having a season that cracks the top 10 from a fantasy perspective? If I'm wrong, so be it, but I'm willing to bet that the answer is no. QB
Tom
14
Brady,
in points per game sounds about right.
Tom Brady just finished as the QB3 overall.
Yeah.
And he was playing with some of the best weapons of his career. But go back to when he was on the Patriots for those last 2 seasons.
He was
2018, QB 14 by fantasy points per game. 2019, QB 16 by fantasy points per game. This is not pure hate. This is realism. I'm sorry, Hunter. And I do not agree that he's not going to eclipse 25 touchdowns. That's Nick's number. If you want to make that bet with Nick, a friendly bet with Nick, go for it. You can make a members-only friendly bet with Nick. I will not agree to that.
26.
I think there's a chance that he still gets to 28 to 30. But I mean, in those 2 seasons for Tom Brady, 29 touchdowns, 24 touchdowns in 2019. 2 years later, he's the number 3. He scores. I mean, 1 year later, he scores 40 touchdowns. 2 years later, he scores 43. What a difference some weapons make.
Yep.
And Aaron Rodgers has none this year. Tom Brady, 24 touchdowns in 2019 and 16 games. 2018, 29 touchdowns. Now, there's one more game played, so I'm not going to say that Aaron Rodgers can't get to 25. But I do think he tops out at 30.
25 to 30 sounds about right. Yeah.
And I'm sorry that you're misconstruing this as hate. Because I'm a huge fan of the Packers. I'm a huge fan of Aaron Rodgers.
We're not. This is we're having a conversation. It's not misconstruing.
All right, but I've made my point with Aaron Rodgers.
He's vouching for his guy. He's vouching for his guy.
Make your point now.
Fair. Me? I mean, I kind of already did it.
Okay.
I kind of already did it. Look, this is If we have to draft the NFL quarterbacks. Like, let's say I have to start my franchise, Aaron Rodgers at 37 is still in that top conversation.
Yes. Absolutely.
I'm not sure about the final numbers, the actual product. Are the wins going to be there? Yeah, sure. I'm not doubting the Packers win the division and are one of the upper echelon teams of the NFC. So that didn't change. Devontae Adams leaving didn't change that. What he did change is a potential 10 touchdown decline for Aaron Rodgers. That's what he might have changed. The season that the Packers are hoping to have is still there. The fantasy numbers for Aaron Rodgers, I'm willing to pivot. So yeah, I have him as my QB 14.
You should move him down one spot. My QB 15, Aaron Rodgers. My QB 16.
And Kirk
I know
Cousins
who you have at
QB
QB 16. I have Matt Ryan.
Matty Ice. All right.
I have Matt Ryan. QB 20 last year on a terrible team, dude.
Oh,
he was 8th in accuracy rating on a terrible team. 7th in drop passes on a terrible team. 2nd in deep ball accuracy rating, which, I mean, he should be able to light it up with Michael Pittman. He was just on a terrible team last year. Number 3 in under pressure accuracy rating. He's still a very efficient, very good quarterback. He, again, was just playing on a terrible team and has been for the past, 3 seasons?
They've been.
I think Matt Ryan can be this year. Maybe not this year's Matt Stafford, because Matt Stafford went on to win the Super Bowl. But he's going to try to do his best Matt Stafford impression. He's going to try to reinvent himself on his new squad.
Right. Oh, yeah.
He will try to reinvent himself on his new squad. 3,968 passing yards. It's the first time in a 11-year span that he didn't throw for 4,000 yards. 20 touchdowns last year with literally nobody, with only Russell Gage at wide receiver and a rookie Kyle Pitts. He should blow those numbers out of the water. And he finished QB 20 last year. So I think he can jump up. He can jump up 4 spots on this new team that he has. Now, the pass catching weapons aren't phenomenal outside of Pittman, but we like Mo Alley Cox. Jonathan Taylor catches passes just fine. And we hope that Paris Campbell can finally stay healthy so we can see what he can do. And maybe he turns into maybe he turns into Russell Gage. Maybe we see Paris Campbell turn into Russell Gage. Maybe Russell Gage plus. I don't think he turns into Calvin Ridley or a Roddy White. But I think he can turn into a Russell Gage plus, considering he's only 24 years old, turning 25. I feel like his name has been around in fantasy circles for so long that we all think he's 28. He's still young. if he can get over those injuries and become a solid number 2, or if Alec Pierce isn't the second coming of Denzel Mims, who I believe he is, and can really produce for the team and as a number 2, or maybe they just maybe they sign Julio Jones because he has that instant mind meld connection with the guy that he's been playing with for his entire career. Yeah. Even without that, I think Matt Ryan has a good chance to jump 4 spots from where he was last year, considering he's still a very good QB and was playing on a terrible team with bad weapons. Again, we're coming into the bad weapons discussion. He gets a good weapons, and I think he can jump 4 spots in the fantasy rankings from where he was last year. He isn't a rusher, but he is one of the most underrated passers of the last 12 years.
Yes, agreed. I mean, there's a reason that the Falcons threw the ball 600 times in half of his seasons, and he always eclipsed 500 pass attempts. There's a reason for that. Gets a phenomenal. His biggest upgrade is his offensive line.
Yes.
Not even close. That to me, and guess what? That matters. That matters significantly.
Because he'll be able to pass downfield more.
Well, yeah, he's actually going to have the time to do what he has to do, make his reads, go through his progressions, all that good stuff. The weapons are just fine. Michael Pittman is an ascending talent who we both have as a low-end wide receiver 1 for the season. In the backfield is the guy who just finished as the overall RB1, and I really like Nyheim Hines as a change of pace back. So the backfield is solid there. We'll see if Campbell can contribute. We like Mo Alley Cox. It's not the deepest collection of talent, but there's enough here where we feel fine about it. And Matt Ryan is a good enough cerebral veteran quarterback at this point to make a situation like this better than it might appear on paper. Matt Ryan did not crack my top 16. He's probably that one tier below, and you kind of already alluded to it. I am a sucker for taking a shot on rushing upside, despite unproven.
Before we get to your guy
talent.
there, I do just want to say
I wasn't about to
2020 Matt Ryan, QB 14 in fantasy points per game. 2019 Matt Ryan, QB 10 in fantasy points per game. Again, that is
he's been there.
I'm pointing to the weapons because he had Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones.
Right. Oh, I remember he was a huge target of mine that year. I do remember that. Yeah. Matt Ryan has always been like, oh, why is he still available in the 12th round? Like that has been before the past couple of years when the ship really sunk with Atlanta. The couple of years prior to that, it was like, why is Matt Ryan available in the 10th round?
Yeah.
So he has delivered the goods. I feel like I've said that a lot today. He doesn't quite break my top 16. But I mean, you're not going to get much of an argument from me. Matt Ryan has a chance at like a career renaissance here in Indianapolis with that offensive line, a good offensive mind in Frank Reich on the sidelines, and considering the Calvin Ridley absence last year, an upgrade in overall weapons when you include the backfield.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So who's your guy that's rounding out the top 16 for you? I'm guessing this is
once again. I will take a shot on the talent might be unproven and raw and untapped.
Is this Ritter?
But I like Desmond Ritter.
Is this Baker? Speaking of rushing upside,
Bryce Young is my QB 16 for 2022.
He's rushing away from the Browns.
Yet. Yeah, he's going to be running away from. He's hopefully running away from.
Is it Jameis because he shed his knee brace?
Other defenders. No, it is Justin Fields.
Okay.
And look, a lot like Trey Lance, there's not much to go off of in the way of proof in the pudding, so to speak. And it's even worse for Justin Fields because the Bears were objectively awful last year. But I think the reason that they were awful is gone, and that's Matt Nagy. I don't know how much of an upgrade Bill Lazor is as an offensive coordinator because, yes, he was the offensive coordinator for the Bengals last year, but I think it's very fair to say that that was the work of the Bengals and their young quarterback, their young star quarterback, and their young star playmakers, more so than it was the offensive coordinator. But there's not too many places to go but up when Matt Nagy is your head coach. Justin Fields' protection rate last year was 33. As in, there are more quarterbacks than there are starting positions in the NFL that had better protection rates than Justin Fields last year. He's at the bottom in a lot of these passing opportunity and productivity stats that you are free to check out on Player Profiler. He's at the bottom. So again, I understand there's not much proof here to go off of as far as putting Justin Fields 16th overall. And we have been hammering the importance of actually having good weapons to justify your ranking, of which Justin Fields does not have. Darnell Mooney is an interesting player. I don't think anybody is pegging him as an alpha wide receiver moving forward. This is a Bears offense that is still very much in transition, but when you still expect, this is my officially now I'm vouching for Justin Fields. We can look at recent history, not even recent history, just history in general, and look at bad offenses with a young quarterback at the helm. Young quarterbacks who have the ability to run often find themselves in a position having to overcompensate for a bad offense and therefore doing more and producing more from a numbers perspective, specifically on the ground. Where Justin Fields was just fine last year was the fact that he chipped in his rookie season in a bad season, in a lost season for that offense, where Allen Robinson was a shell of himself and maybe mailing it in with the writing on the wall. Still ran for over 400 yards and chipped in 2 scores on the ground. That is all it takes for me to be interested in a second-year quarterback in an offense going through a transition, still very much lacking in pieces. I think we see Justin Fields overcompensating on the ground. I'm not going to get too carried away with my rushing expectations for him, but I think he's got the rushing upside at enough to where I don't even care if he throws for, say, 2,500 passing yards. I think he can deliver a rock-solid QB2 finish, and he'll have QB1 weeks. He will not, I cannot possibly predict he finishes as a QB1 in points per game or overall finish, but I think the upside is there for him to finish as a QB2 with upside and optimism for the future.
There you go. I mean,
that's all I got. The number.
I'm going to point to weapons there. Again. I'm going to point to weapons
are
again.
Not there, which I think lends to he could run a lot. That's my. There's no proof. Well, the 400 rushing yards would lend some credence to that, but I think he runs a lot, and that's what makes me. That's the intangible that excites me about Justin Fields from a fantasy perspective.
Fair. You can run for 100 yards. I don't know. I mean, he would have to, I don't know, man. I know the rushing upside is a thing. I'm sorry. I was just looking up his game logs from last year.
Yeah.
He has one 100-yard rushing game where he threw for 175 yards and had 1 rushing touchdown. Ended up scoring 26.3 fantasy points that game. But I think it's unrealistic to expect him to in every game or even 3/4 of the games rush for 100 yards and a rushing touchdown.
I'm not expecting that. But I think if he can average somewhere in, and maybe this is ambitious, but if he gets around 40 to 50 rushing yards on the ground, the rest will take care of itself.
Now, over the last 5 weeks here, I'm looking at 26.3 fantasy points, 19.1 fantasy points, 3.5 fantasy points, 20.4 fantasy points, 16.9 fantasy points. If he can get that average over the course of an entire season,
it's going to be there.
I'm sold.
It's going to be there at the end.
I just need to see it.
I'm willing to bet on This is a scenario, and much like Trey Lance, when you have the rushing upside that guys like this bring to the table, I'm willing to bet on the fact that we haven't seen it yet.
Fair enough.
I am. I called it. I said it with Jalen Hurts last year. I said it a couple of years ago with Lamar Jackson. I'm willing to bet on those guys, even if we haven't seen it yet. Young quarterbacks who can run, overcompensating for a lack of weapons. That's where I'm willing to break the mold as far as what does the talent look like around the quarterback. When it's a young quarterback who can run, I'll take my shot.
And I'm looking at his I know it doesn't quite factor into what we're talking about here, but I'm looking at his rushing stats in his college career.
Okay.
The closest thing that I can see here is 137 attempts for 484 yards and 10 touchdowns in his sophomore season in 14 games.
Yeah.
I could see him reaching that yardage total. I don't see him reaching that touchdown total in the NFL. I think that's a little bit lofty, even though we did just see that from Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, any given season, I'm not going to predict 10 touchdowns on the ground.
He was highly thought of coming out. He was just so bad last year. And that offense was so bad last year, and then they lost their number one target, de facto number one target, in Allen Robinson. That I think I can see it. I'm not going to argue you on it because it is, again, QB 16. I'm not going to argue you on it. You've been right about rushing quarterbacks in the past. I think that I would probably have him QB 17 or 18. So I'm not really going to fight you on the QB 16 ranking.
Yeah, I mean, right. I don't have Justin Fields as my QB 12.
I've just also seen pass first aging quarterbacks go to new teams much better than their old teams, going back to Peyton Manning, and I know we're talking about one of the best in the history of the NFL there, but going back to Peyton Manning and blowing their prior numbers while they were just kind of stagnant on the first team that drafted them out of the water. There's been a history of these quarterbacks that finally get off of the team that drafted them, and they've been on for 10 years, 12 years, and kind of blown up. Mm-hmm. Becoming, if not QB1s, very high-end QB2s. We saw it with, we saw it with Stafford. We saw it with Brady. We saw it with Peyton. It did not happen with Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, that was just 1 year, and he was like 40 years old. So,
and the number one there was a broken down T.Y. Hilton, and they didn't have Jonathan Taylor for one of those seasons as well.
They had Taylor. Taylor was a rookie for Rivers one season there, and he was a rookie. Right. He was good. He wasn't wherever you wanted.
I was just looking for historical comps to that situation. I've seen passing quarterbacks, get it done in the twilight of their careers until they completely fall off the physical cliff.
Yeah.
But I've also seen rushing quarterbacks boost their value just by the nature of being rushing quarterbacks. So It could go either way. We're split. So you guys are going to have to make up your minds with respect to that. But that is our top 16.
Top 16. I think we had we had all the same names except for the end there. You had Matt Ryan in. I had Justin Fields in for different reasons. It's probably fair to have a follow-up show about other upside quarterbacks that we like, and we can talk a little bit more about maybe why I left Matt Ryan out, maybe why you left Justin Fields out. Could be something worth exploring. But yeah, those are our top quarterbacks for the 2022 season. And as always, we'll go back and timestamp this live stream. If anybody wants to go back and hear our thoughts on any one guy specifically, what's
going on, Brandon? You're catching us right at the tail end of the stream, so you're going to have to go back and watch the beginning of the stream. to catch up to where we're at, unfortunately. But thank you for joining us in here. Sorry you caught us late.
Yeah, we got a few.
Our quarterbacks
like I said,
were, just to go over it, were Josh Allen 1. I had Justin Herbert 2 and Kyler Murray 3. Nick had Kyler Murray 2 and Justin Herbert 3. We both had Lamar Jackson at 4. We both had Pat Mahomes at 5. At 6, Nick had Jalen Hurts. I had Joe Burrow. At 7, I had Jalen Hurts. Nick had Trey Lance. At 8,
yes, sir.
I had Russell Wilson. You had...
This is where I had Burrow.
This is where you had Burrow. You had Russell Wilson at 9.
Russ at 9. Yep.
I had Trey Lance at 9. I had other players at 9, but Nick talked me into having Trey Lance at 9. We both had Matt Stafford at 10. We both had Tom Brady at 11. At 12, I had Dak Prescott. Nick had Derek Carr. At 13, I had Kirk Cousins. Nick had...
I had Dak here.
You had Dak there. At 14, I had Derek Carr. At 14, Nick had Aaron Rodgers. At 15, I had Aaron Rodgers. And you had...
This is where I had Cousins.
Cousins. And at 16, Nick had Justin Fields. And I had Matt Ryan. So, pretty, again, like Nick said, pretty much all the same guys.
Basically
and
the same names.
You're gonna have to rewind the tape
if you feel so inclined
to hear our reasons why we have those rankings.
If you feel so inclined, and I'll timestamp the stream. So if anybody wants to hear our thoughts on any one guy specifically, you absolutely can do that.
But thank y'all for tuning in with us today. It was a fun stream going over quarterbacks and going into, once we got into some of the deeper names down the list, and it was actually kind of fun to just talk about the guys that we had, the consensus guys up at the top. It was kind of a fun conversation there too. It was fun to burst Hunter L's bubble there with the Packers a little bit. Sorry, man. I just had to, poke the bear a little bit more.
I agree, though. Hunter, it'll, the Packers are going to run the ball a lot, and I think they're going to have a ton of success because Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are both awesome.
And Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He's just not it's not going to reflect in his fantasy numbers this year.
Yeah,
as much as it has
14
in past
points
seasons.
per game, but they'll still go 12-5. So, yeah.
But keep an eye out for some videos that we're dropping from past live streams, cut-ups from past live streams over the next few days, extending into the weekend. Nick is going to be going into the tank and working on his redraft draft kit this week, so our members are going to have access to that sooner than y'all Reggies. But it'll be out there in the public for all y'all sooner than later. I'm going to have a video for you guys over the weekend as well. And next week, Tuesday, we'll be back here with another live stream Tuesday and Thursday, 6 p.m. EST. Y'all already know. And if y'all want to become members, we are going to be setting up drafts, leagues with you guys soon. That is something that we offer to our members, and we haven't set that up yet, but we will have 2022 Redraft Leagues with y'all, so we'll be able to play fantasy football with you guys. We might also have, a fun format in there like zombie leagues or guillotine leagues. If you don't know about those, look them up. They're fun little formats. We also do team one-on-ones, so we'll have one-on-ones with you off stream to go over your dynasty league or whatever direction you want to take in a redraft league once you do draft in your redraft leagues and stuff like that. What else we got? What else we offer? I think I'm blanking.
Just the Discord, I think.
And the Discord, right. Nick is the active man in the Discord, always giving everybody trade advice, but we also have a pretty active community in there. If you are a member, you get access to our members-only Discord, but there is a public Discord channel for our YouTube channel as well, so you can just jump in there, not become a member, and still get access to a lot of the perks as far as the Discord is concerned that the members get. Members just get a little bit more access to us. But,
and all of these links are in the description of all the videos that we've put out recently on this channel, including this one.
Yes. But thank y'all for tuning in. Chat's been awesome today. Chilling with y'all has been awesome today, as always. And I hope you guys have a great weekend.
Yes, sir.
And we will see you next week.
Sounds good. Yep. Stay safe. Have fun. Thanks, everybody.
Peace, y'all.